I decided to no longer play dice. I'm throwing a pebble, watching the ripples, and riding a boat across the waves of a new tomorrow. I truly believe this could be a mark that defines a grander future for SCD. But that isn't what we're here for. We're here to see a tier list. But be forewarned, this is no conventional tier list video, and there will be slight spoilers too. The strangeness of the video is why I made my lofty declaration. With that said, great to see you one and all. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. From humble observer to adorable ringleader, I am your host, C. No relation to the English letter. So, a common misconception is that when scaling an SCD, these tiers could be intuitively grasped, which isn't the case. And the other misconception is on what a system actually is, because none of the scalings actually are a system, and we'll go into that. So first, a system can be defined as a set of interrelated or interdependent components that form a cohesive whole, operating together to fulfill one or more purposes. So in other words, the parts of a system are connected in ways that the behavior or change in one part affects the behavior of other parts and ultimately the performance or outcome of the entire system. A system then are complex phenomena as integrated wholes rather than merely as collections of parts. So no scaling system is in fact a system. Not even normal scaling, which doesn't claim to be one, but it ironically gets the closest to being one. Now, it isn't a system because we don't know how its parts ought to interact with one another, and that is a problem with all scaling in SCD. They are more hermeneutical analyses rather than scales, which is fine. Analyzing a narrative to get a more clearer picture of feats is a good method, but it's not a scale or a system. And scales principally measure or weigh entities, things, and phenomena. So quantitatively, but it can also be qualitatively, so through ontology, which has logic as a foundation, so that would be both quantitative and qualitative. So an SCD scale ought to measure smartness, and smartness is a particular of intelligence, like how algebra is a particular of mathematics, or how light Yagami is a particular of the Death Note universe. A slice of an onion, so to say. And like an onion, it has depths, and we need to define those depths. Those depths we call intelligence, rigorously. So intelligence, a basic definition, is just the faculty of understanding, so that would be the capacity to know or apprehend. And the secondary definition would be the available ability as measured by intelligence tests or by other social criteria to use one's existing knowledge to meet new situations and to solve new problems, or to learn, to foresee problems, to use symbols or relationships to create new relationships, to think abstractly. To elaborate on that, that would be the ability to perceive one's environment, to deal with it symbolically, to deal with it effectively, to adjust to it, to work towards a goal. The degree of one's alertness, awareness, or acuity. The ability to use with awareness the mechanism of reasoning, whether conceived as a unified intellectual factor or as an aggregate of many intellectual factors or ability, as intuitive or analytical or organismic or biological, physiological, psychological, or social in origin or nature. What's interesting is this only defines human intelligence. Of course, since we're scaling fiction, that definition can stretch even further, so we can include supernatural and spiritual aspects. In other words, intelligence is a multivariate construct encompassing understanding, so that would be the comprehension of systems, abstract concepts, problem solving, the capacity to resolve novel and complex challenges, adaptability, flexibility to adjust to changing environments, creativity, the ability to generate novel solutions, social and emotional intelligence, navigating social dynamics effectively, metacognition, which would be the awareness of one's cognitive processes or being aware of how we think or thinking about how you think. So to compartmentalize that, outsmarting would be the act of strategically overcoming an adversary or situation by employing a combination of intelligence, adaptability, and manipulation It encompasses both direct confrontation and indirect influence, and operates on a spectrum from localized interactions to systemic and conceptual manipulation. It's an inherently performance-based metric. So to break this down, outsmarting is a strategic ability to surpass, overcome, or manipulate others, whether they be individuals, groups, or systems, through superior tactical reasoning, creativity, foresight, and adaptability. It encompasses abstraction, so that would be the level of conceptual thinking involved, including the handling of paradoxes, nonlinear dynamics, or ontological manipulation, which will be important for the latter part of the tier list. The understanding exploitation of context, so that would be recognizing the rules, dynamics, or principles governing a given scenario or system and exploiting them to gain an advantage. Psychological or systemic manipulation, that would be influencing, predicting, or controlling the actions, decisions, or perceptions of others, whether that's on an individual, societal, or universal scale, and we just mean all parts of a whole, essentially. Adaptation and innovation, the ability to adjust strategies dynamically based on new information or changes in the environment, often inventing creative solutions that others cannot foresee. So, Ionokoji is more rigid, but someone who's constantly adjusting strategies dynamically would be Usogui. That would be a good example where they're constantly adjusting their strategy. Something like air poker. The complexity of opposition. Outsmarting is directly proportional to the sophistication of the opposition or system. So outsmarting more intelligent, resourceful, or complex adversaries is inherently more significant. Depth of strategy and foresight. Success is derived from layered, multi-dimensional plans that account for contingencies, leverage hidden opportunities, and anticipate future outcomes. So that would just be Ionokoji's X strategy and his entire class transfer plan entirely. Scope and scale of influence. Outsmarting ranges from localized, so I've already mentioned this, individual small group context, to systemic, global, universal frameworks. And the scale of influence affects its impact and tier categorization. And then there's intrinsic versus resource-driven intelligence. So outsmarting primarily emphasizes intrinsic intelligence, ingenuity, and agency, rather than reliance on external tools, resources, or powers. The effective use of resources can amplify results. So examples of this would be like using Death Note, Aizen's Kyoko Soigetsu. Those are resources that they use effectively to amplify their results, but then you have characters who rely on pre-established systems to effectively get higher outsmarting. Creative innovation, the ability to create novel, effective solutions in unpredictable, complex situations. Then you have anticipation, foresight, or AF, predicting actions, outcomes, or events before they occur and leveraging this knowledge. Cross-scenario superiority, or CSS, success in multiple types of environments or systems, whether they be localized, chaotic, or structured. So now we should go into the tiers themselves, their meanings and qualities, and of course the characters. But we'll do this tier by tier, as in to distribute the characters in their tier, using these. However, I'm not going to talk about every character. I'll say their name maybe. If I'm interested in them, I'll talk about them a little bit. But I probably will expand on every character in videos, especially if they have interesting interactions between each other. But part of this video was to introduce new characters in the community so you can research them for yourself, but also to have a comprehensive list. I think this will be a episode 1 type of tier list video, and I might do another one in the future once people get more indoctrinated into the system and learn more characters that are here. So everything consistent across outsmarting would be base complexity, which is the inherent difficulty of outsmarting an average individual. Domain expertise, the opponent's specialized skills, whether they be athletic, intellectual, or creative. So that would be in 1-outs, the baseball player's skill in baseball, for example. But it could just be any other specialized skill. So Akagi didn't have mahjong skills, but Washizu does. And that's a good example. So context alignment, so that's a multiplier that adjusts how well their skills apply to the specific scenario. So the formula would be outsmarting is base complexity plus domain expertise times by context alignment. If you want me to elaborate on the basis for the metric as a community post, then comment down below if you would like that. So to move off the generalized nature, we're in the first tier over here, which is localized outsmarting. That's why I call it. So the scope is direct manipulation of localized systems such as individual opponents, small groups, or confined rule-based frameworks. So that would be games or localized schemes essentially. And the key metrics here are tactics, which are obviously precision and efficiency in executing strategies in defined systems. So winning a game of chess or navigating a single negotiation would need precise and efficient tactics. Well, if you're high elo in chess obviously, or in negotiations you generally need good tactics to have successful negotiations, such as black swans. Psychological insight, or PI, the ability to read and exploit human behavior in small scale interactions. This is probably going to be a quasi-constant. Opponent complexity, so the intelligence and strategy level of opponent, but obviously you have the general speciality of their skills factored into that. But that would be, the outsmarting index would be TAC plus PI times by OC, or tactics plus psychological insight times by opponent complexity, and that would be like scale them up in the tiers. So you can kind of tell, you can see these characters in the tiers, you can see where they scale. That's why I don't need to talk about them, because if they're here, you can kind of scale them within the tier to see who beats who. So Yumiko, she doesn't really lean into the political aspect of Kakegiri, so not really going to elaborate on her, but she is good enough with her localized one-on-one gamble. She does face competent opponents in one-on-one interactions and outsmart them through innovative ways, kind of using her own like mad gambling and her willingness to act in those situations. Against Mary, for example, obviously her against Kidari, but Kidari's smarter than her. We'll get to Kidari, I guess. Yokoya, he's not... Okay, so Yokoya, you probably think, oh, he should be higher. He doesn't really have anything for that. And the reason I say that isn't just because he genuinely has nothing, because you can make enough. Because obviously if Akiyama's higher, then Yokoya also maybe has something. But the difference is that Yokoya had perfect information, or practice, what was in practice perfect information of the liar game, and still was stalemated, which resulted in a loss, because the overall goal, he needed a win, he couldn't get a draw, because he's not going to stay there forever, essentially. So yeah, he lost, he got absolutely destroyed, but he's good enough to be here because of his feats in Contraband, where he never had perfect information and still managed to push Akiyama to an extreme diff. But he got outsmarted by lesser opponents like Harimoto, Kinmura K in other games like Musical Chairs. There's also ineffective things in Liar Game that people have done analysis on that can like bump this lower. There's people that do docs don't really go over that. But yeah, he's not downplayed, he genuinely just isn't that good. This is not in order, by the way, none of this is in order. This is like, the only thing that's in order is the tiers themselves. So Yokoya is not the second worst character on this tier list, he's just a tier 1 character, or tier 1.5 specifically. I didn't include 0.5 in tier 1 because I didn't think it was relevant enough. There's not a lot of characters in tier 1. Oh, you should not be there. Walter White. So Walter, he has a huge ego and hubris. I like to talk about the weaknesses of the characters too, and that kind of like limits his broader impact. He did have a drug empire on a national scale, arguably. However, the issue is, well, he nearly died several times, one-on-one interactions. He's been very in desperate situations. He got his influence, it was indirect influence. He didn't actually gain that influence on his own. He just took it from this character here, who built it over decades upon decades, and already had a connection to do that through the cartel. But that was also his own skill and business. But he didn't really have any opponents contesting that. But we won't talk about Gus right now, it's about Walt. So what Walt does well well, he overcame Gus with a really innovative strategy, leveraging Hector's hatred, which was really hard to balance. Like, he needed a lot of psychological insight to weigh that Hector hates Gus more than him. His hatred has lasted longer, and, well, Hector cares about legacy too, so it'll be a legacy to kill his worst enemy. So he essentially deceived Gus by making him think that Hector was going to rat on him to the DEA. He didn't. He just did that to make Gus make a preemptive move. Gus got blown up. Spoiler alert. Katagiri or Shiba Yuichi. Yuichi is a very complex character, and so he's not cognitively gifted. He's actually very average cognitively. He's below Shiba cognitively in some regards. But I think that's just because he's not an academics guy, because when he can apply his cognition in other areas, such as in prison game, making keys that requires precise attention to detail, for example, manipulating the mechanism of a gun, although that's a shaky one, but he did rig it. He does show he's quite good, and he has to have good abstract reasoning as well to do what he does. You could argue he's tier 2, but we just didn't see it because most of Tomodachi game is on a localized scale. There are a lot of competitors in some areas, but they aren't competent, so they get diminished by the opponent complexity. They don't have high opponent complexity, and he really suffers from that. None of his opponents are really that complex. He has Kei Shinomiya, but we don't really see Kei Shinomiya himself, even though he's a reported genius. We don't really see that in action well enough above for it to justify tier 2 complexity. He's just tier 1 complexity himself. He doesn't face anyone on par with him. He's pretty much playing with fishes. He's a big shark in a small pond. But yeah, he did dismantle the Tomodachi game. Tomodachi game wasn't that complex systemically. His underworld influence, yeah, it does have a good network, but at the same time, the person running the Tomodachi game is a millionaire anyway. He has the resources inherently already. He didn't have to build that up. So yeah, not much to say about Yuichi. He does have multi-dimensional planning, so he's a really good tier 1 for the record. He's not a bad tier 1. He's a really good one. But he is unfortunately tier 1. If you can convince me of otherwise, feel free to do so. Ray, Promised Neverland, very good character. In the Promised Neverland, they go against evolved demons in a future setting. It's a dystopian future setting. Technically it's not, but that's a spoiler. But anyway, yeah, so they're oppressed by demons, escaped Gracefield House, which is a top facility, was part of the heavy brains behind that scheme. Survived in the wild with minimal resources against intelligent demons, more intelligent than humans that we would have on Earth. There's another feat in the Golden Meadow where they end up killing the Grand Duke, who should be like the second most intelligent demon of them all. Well, third if you count him as a demon, but I don't count him as a demon. He is technically one though, so that would be third. So that guy would be like, he would already be superhuman, and then he would be like the apex of those superhumans, so that's pretty good. Mir, now he does affect broader systems, however, he's too slow. He loses in interactions are one-on-one quite consistently. You can argue he never really loses to anyone that's like below tier 2 or like is out, but he is outperformed in some regard by another tier 1 who should be on here. Yeah, in some areas he lacks initiative, and that's his main weakness. He essentially deals with a drug empire for months on end. An investigation, someone like L has that done in a second, unironically. He takes months just for the investigation. That's a very poor weakness to have, that he takes such long term for his strategies. He has a really high cognition though, which would help him in any type of game scenario. If you put him in a one-on-one game scenario, he's probably beaten most opponents, but in non-systemic structures he will struggle a lot because he just takes too long. to do anything really. Nagumo. So Nagumo, he took 3 weeks planning against Horikita Manabu, but he succeeded and failed at the same time, and that's a huge L. He isn't really that adaptive against physical threats like that are superior to him or unexpectedly superior to him. Like RDC will have bodyguards, for example. He won't have that. He'll just rely on his own strengths, and that would cost him realistically if Ayano Koji wasn't involved. It was a bait though to begin with, so that won't diminish his qualities. He doesn't really do any. He does do actually non-localized outsmarting, surprisingly, if I actually talk about Anashias' structures, but he loses to people who cannot handle that level of outsmarting, which we'll get to, or haven't shown that level of outsmarting even. And he is very resource reliant rather than the reverse, unfortunately for him. He doesn't have any good feats of outsmarting any above average, so his base complexity isn't that high until you factor in he did technically outsmart, but it was with huge prep, so he relied on huge prep to outsmart someone that has higher base complexity and didn't entirely succeed. Did force him to change to adapt to the circumstances, but he didn't succeed overall. He won too easily, that's another thing. His ego, it's not a big weakness actually, because he manages it quite well. He did deceive Takuya, which I don't know if the Takuya fans want to admit, but he did do that in Volume 7, in Year 2 Volume 7. He's okay. He's just okay. Minato, he does have good foresight actually, with the whole sealing of the Nine Tails in Naruto to protect Konoha. That was actually good foresight. But primarily he does have impressive intelligence. Like, you can say he has high base complexity, but unfortunately the scale of that is, like, he has good opponent complexity, but the scale of that is mainly in one-on-one battles, to be fair. So the tactics he employs are in Localized, so we can't have him higher. We can't have him in Tier 2, even if he does have high opponent complexity. But we can have him at 1.5 because of that. Willard H, right? But not the Umineko one, obviously. This is the actual one. Golden Age Detective. Mello, he's known in the community. He's impulsive as well, but he affects that on a good scale. So he manages that somewhat poorly sometimes. Like, he won't have good foresight, that's how he died, but he also adapts to those circumstances, and it also makes him act. So he uses it as a tool for him to act, and it works in that way. Like, he was the first one to corner Kira out of him and Nier, because Nier never acts, he's the reverse. He acts the right way. He also has an interesting feat where he's able to kill a mafia boss who even Kira could not find with L's resources, Wateri's resources, and Misa's Shinigami eyes. That's a really impressive feat actually, if you think about it. That's a Tier 2 feat easily, if not higher. But he's primarily Localized as well. He's below Nier for sure. He dies in the one-on-one interactions. Not much else to say about Mello. Emma, she has really high abstract reasoning. She has like at least Tier 4 abstract reasoning, which is crazy. Like, a Tier 1 character having that high abstract reasoning. But overall, she's Localized survivalist. Her Tier 4 abstract reasoning comes from her being the only one to push her consciousness to a 4th dimensional scale to converse and negotiate with him. It's a one-on-one interaction, but it's a one-on-one interaction with a universal entity, so that's actually a higher tier. She is the highest tier feat, probably in all this tier, and maybe even the above tiers as well for a while. But unfortunately, she does lose sometimes in one-on-one interactions against Isabella. If she overcomes Isabella though, she really is reliant on her friends and her siblings at Gracefield House. She can't clear multi-agent scenarios on her own either, but she does survive really well. They're really difficult scenarios, but she doesn't clear it, so we can't really... Can we benefit for her surviving it? Yes, but can we benefit her to a higher degree than 1? No, but she is 1.5 easily. Kyoko Kirigiri, an interesting one. If you take the Kirigiri novels into account, you can get her to tier 2. But even higher actually, because she was basically this other character's plan to defeat Junko, but Junko countered it. Even though that, we'll get to that guy, but Junko countered it with, like, accidentally, and that's crazy. Well, not accidentally, because she's Junko. She did analyze that part and break it down. But she intuited it and countered it, so it didn't end up going anywhere. But that was her potential. Her potential was to counter Junko, like to stop the tragedy before it even happened. That was like what she was made for. She went in a ton of localized cases. She solved many at once at one point, and that's a tier 2 feat. So, but she's really specialized. She's a specialized character, and because she's too specialized, she can't go to tier 2, in my opinion. Yeah. To you. Friend, you're like, oh wow, Friend, he's a world manipulator, isn't he? Why is he in a higher tier? Well, I'm glad you asked that, Timmy. So, he's not in a high tier because his world is a parallel Earth to ours that is less sophisticated than ours is. His plans and strategies have been used in real life for the most part, and they made it to a national scale and then failed. He also is a very, very long-term planner, and he relies so much on his resources. But he built, the difference between Friend, the reason I think Friend is still pretty good is because he built up his resources on his own for the most part. He did have help, like he has help every step of the way, but he also has a natural charisma and charm that he uses and to socially influence. And his creativity, the whole point of it is that they're really childish, and he's pretty much leveraging his influence over others to put these childish plans into the world, really. And they succeed because of his manipulation over society as a whole. Also, his plan against, saving the Pope by faking his death, that never would have succeeded, obviously, in a more complex system. It's specifically because his system is unsophisticated why those succeed. He also immediately got his plans game ended from day one almost by a victim of any detective on this tier list, to be honest. Celestia Ludenberg. She's a really funny statement where she's cleared the liar game, and it was the actual liar game. It was with it showed Akiyama and now when it was displaying her feet, but we're not going to use that as a parallel liar game. I don't think it's fair to scale her to that degree, because what she showed, she had a really multi-dimensional, it was really impressive tactical execution, and it was quite layered, but ended up getting solved by Naegi, who isn't arguably, maybe he's tier 1, but maybe he's not on here, so yeah. She failed in a localized scenario. The liar game I think is more complex than the situation she failed in, so we're not going to cross scale her off of that. Gus Fring, already talked a bit about him. Really good business management. He's really smart, methodical. He donates to the DEA, so we can always have an eye on them. So he's really good at information gathering using his social image. It's really clever. He lost to Walter White there, so can't be much higher than that. I don't think Walter White is competent enough to justify him losing, Gus losing, because of an oversight, because of his own hubris and the control he had leveraged over Hector. It was mainly the deception that went into that, because it wasn't luck based, it was controlled. He lost in a controlled manner. So I think he sticks, and he also lost to Lalo. He got lucky against Lalo, so I think these guys are in a trinity. Karma Akabane, now he's interesting. There's this character called Gakuho. He has his son. Karma's superior to that guy's so his son's pretty much Nagumo of Assassination Classroom. Karma is superior to him. Karma does interesting things. He's come close to killing Koro Sensei with these really unique schemes, but we don't really see Karma on a localized, maybe adult Karma. I haven't really looked into adult Karma. Maybe he's higher. And same with Nier. Maybe you can say adult Nier has overcome the initiative problem. He absorbed the psychological profiling or integrated it into his own psyche of mellow, so he overcame that issue. Maybe you can get him higher off that. Same with karma, maybe adult karma's higher. But he doesn't really have any larger scale impact. Cars, supposedly he has what, 4,000 IQ, maybe lower, 400 IQ, so supposedly it's 400 IQ, but he definitely does not display it. He loses in a one-on-one interaction with Joseph Joestar. You're like, doesn't that upscale Joseph Joestar? Well, no, because Joseph Joestar only has one-on-one localized interactions himself, so that doesn't upscale him, because Cars doesn't have any higher. If Cars was a higher, it would upscale him if Cars was higher tiered, but he's not. And neither are any of the Pillar Men, actually. This Cars, at least, by the way, I specifically mean like regular Cars, just like standard Cars when he appeared in part 2. Arisu Sakayanagi, I think I agree with her evaluation of her abilities. I do think she's above the White Reamers, but she does exude pretty good control over NHAS's dynamics, but not enough to push her higher, like not on a Ayana Koji scale. I think that's the difference. We'll talk about Ayana Koji when we get to him, but yeah, she demolished Ryulen. Her plans off screen, so you kind of have to analyze them for the most part. She played a huge role in Ichinose's breakdown, like she contributed to the Rima strategy, but you'll, like, obviously Ayana Koji is more impressive stuff there. Alexander Mahone, now he's interesting because, so he was in a Yokoya situation, but he didn't fail. His information was letting him be one step ahead of Michael Schofield for a while, but Schofield was in like the worst situation possible and still overcame it against Mahone. He never performs anything like a one-on-one on the level again, maybe because he lost his resources. So the reason he was able to keep up with Schofield like that was experience, wit, and resources, which kind of lowers him in that estimation. He doesn't have any feats pushing him higher, unfortunately, for Mahone, but he's pretty good overall. Probably outsmart a lot of characters in his tier. Dexter Morgan, he's pretty alright. He does go against impressive killers, but localized scale for the most part as well, but they are smart. He has high base complexity, high psychological insight for his tier. Tactics, that's something else. We won't talk about that bit. He does outsmart Ice Truck Killer, Trinity Killer, really impressive killer to outsmart. Not much to say about Dex. So he breaks his code, unfortunately, like, so that actually shows he can't handle rules that effectively every single time. Like, he has a rigid rule, a deontological rule system, but he breaks it many times. Harry's rules. Heizo Hattori, it's from Conan. He's Heiji Hattori's dad. He's law enforcement, but doesn't really like pushes the international tier. Maybe Heiji, yeah, he could be here actually. Yeah, I think he could be there if you want, but for now I haven't seen anything to push him that higher. Rust Cole. Okay, so Rust is primarily on a localized scale, but the framework of the series is kind of like the Mentalist, where there's an overarching case. The difference is there's only one of those, and that's against essentially this cult, where Rust actually gets deceived, where he thinks he solved the case, but then he has this obsessive nature, and it keeps him to realize he hasn't solved the case. They eventually do end up killing the guy who's mainly behind it, Childress, Errol Childress, who had like systemic, pretty much statewide manipulations on a cult-like manner, based on The King in Yellow, which is a poem, but it was also adapted into Lovecraftian material with Haster. But anyway, that's irrelevant. Rust, he's just competent. He's a genius detective. He has really unique strategies. He has synesthesia, so that means that he can see colors. Actually, like, he has higher color perception, pretty much. It practically gives him a sixth sense, and that's a really unique aspect to him that he can use to read emotions, things like that. He has really high EE, like he'll just stay obsessively on this case for decades upon decades by himself, whether he has help or not, whether he's employed or not, he'll still stick on it. He's also a former drug user though, so maybe a guy with more psychological insight can exploit that. But he's kind of like overcome that. He does have trauma that you could use against him as well, but for the most part he's fine. He has an existential quality to him, which I think any of these characters in this entire tier has. So he has something that no one else has, the existential quality. You can argue, oh, why are you there? Whoops. Okay, now he has nothing any other character has. His philosophical nihilism, or pessimism even. It's mainly nihilism. And from a Nietzschean context, like he even believes in, he misinterprets the philosophy, but that's not him misinterpreting the philosophy, that's more so the showrunner, so I'm not going to penalize him for that. But yeah, you could argue that's intentional as well, to like fuel his pessimism, but we're getting into writing now, we're not talking about SCD anymore. Joe Goldberg. So he does end up having tier 2.5 influence in the end, but he gets it indirectly just through relationships, so I'm not counting that as him being that tier. That's not the same thing at all. But he does come up with like really clever schemes, like when he's in like desperate situations, his like survival turns on. He turns into like he's just basically in the flow state or something. He was basically pinned against love, completely outsmarted her in the end. He has been outsmarted by love, so that's again puts him lower. I don't think Love Quinn's a very impressive opponent, but she does have she's above average intelligence, but she's nothing that special. He does have a high IQ. He has good application of his knowledge actually, but that's not really relevant like for tactics. It's relevant for tactics actually, because his knowledge of things in books allows him to abstract that essence and then apply it into the schemes he comes up with, like when he had Beck hostage in his Hannibal Lecter cage. That was early Goldberg, season 1 Goldberg. And then in the future he gets really good, like he just builds experience, he becomes an accomplished killer. Spoiler if you haven't watched, he has dissociative identity disorder, which he actually outsmarts himself. He's literally scheming against himself at one point, but then also navigating all these other opponents, catching a guy with high influence off guard, but he didn't build that influence because he's like a complete intellectual, outsmarting intellectual giant. It's not why. Cheshire, don't really care about Alice in Borderland, but he's been talked about, so he's here. Detective Zeno, really funny story about Zeno. So the thing about Zeno is, I had him in tier 3 accidentally. I was like shifting around characters in the tier list. I had him in tier 3. He's nowhere close to tier 3, Zeno, but he's really good. He's a genius detective easily. Deals with complex cases. Maybe if you think the complexity is high enough to put him in tier 2, be my guest. I don't think it is. I don't know if it is, rather. Nagito Komaeda, really insane character, actually insane. The first case in Danganronpa was a really complex one because he added to the complexity. He wasn't even a Blackened, spoiler alert, but he acted like he was. He uses luck a lot. He's really good at using that external. He's another example of when I was talking about earlier, where they have these resources that are amplify results, or it's more of the power. He uses his power to amplify his results. He's a master of that craft, but he's mostly on a localized scale. Unless you want to count his off-screen as an ultimate despair, you can say he probably is a tier 2 character off of that. He's tier 2 potential, but then again he's also in what you can amount to a cult, so maybe not. The Servant, he's manipulated Monokatoa and other competent individuals. Should have been on this tier list too, but she isn't. But she would be here. She'd be 1.5 easily. She was like going to be Junko's successor. He's really good. His last case and his first case are really complex cases where he didn't fake his own death. He did die for his case, so he is some of the highest willingness to act on this entire tier list. Like, there are only a few characters who have died for their schemes, and I don't think any of those characters truly died. Like, they came back after because they planned for them to come back to life. As absurd as that sounds, that's what they do. Yeah, and Nagito Komaeda, pretty good. There was a debate for a while with him and Kokichi, but nah, just nah. Rokosuke Koenji, a surprising placement. Many people probably thought I would have him higher, but no. He doesn't have the feats outside of the localized scenario, but he has traits that probably have comparable complexity to higher systems. Maybe you could argue that. But he's just a character who hasn't done a whole lot, so we can't really make accurate judgments on him yet, but he probably will be much higher. Only guy who's seen through Koji's schemes at all in the series. He saw through Nagumo's old maid instantly, like by blinking. Deduced Koji was X. He constructed a scheme for his freedom that was a year span, and that scheme, that's like a tier 2 level scheme. So he's a character that has no reason not to be tier 2, except that we simply don't have ample. It would be a hasty generalization to put him in tier 2 or higher. Saul Goodman, I kind of already talked about the Breaking Bad Better Call Saul characters. He's really creative. He comes up with interesting schemes coming from his con man background, because he was slipping Jimmy in his past, and then he brought that into his adult life. When the going gets tough, he becomes slipping Jimmy as a defense mechanism. Having a defense mechanism is good, but he lets it corrupt him. There's many factors that lead to him being corrupting, but I'm not going to talk about that. He's really good at finding loopholes, so he would be good in a game scenario. So there would be localized scenarios where he's good. He's the definition of cooking up localized schemes. Very good character, outsmarted. He didn't outsmart Tuco per se, but he manipulated Tuco easily. He outsmarted him originally, and then Nacho saw through it, but then he adapted off the circumstance. Talked down someone who Tuco was going to kill. Tuco's a very violent, hardened criminal, psychotic, sociopathic. Arguably, he would have killed them no matter what if Soul wasn't there specifically. I don't think that's arguable. I think that just is the case. And he talked down from a death sentence to 2 broken legs. So he's really good at persuasion, really high charm, which is a factor some characters don't possess because they're very eccentric people, or they have other things that like holding back. Takuya Yagami, inferiority complex incarnate. Some people think he's 120 IQ and he shouldn't even be on this tier list. He's not 120 IQ out of context. He's 120 IQ in context, maybe, but I do think he's a exceptional individual. He has to be to survive the White Room, but at the same time, people aren't talking about neuroplasticity. There's not a lot of neuroscientific knowledge of how you could survive the White Room without necessarily having high IQ or any of these other factors. We see he leverages his knowledge well in some regards and then doesn't in others. He actually has his knowledge get used against him, his ego get used against him, his hubris. Before he could have easily expelled Ayano Koji if he wasn't Takuya Yagami. Pretty much anyone else in the same position as him, who cooked up the same schemes as him, is solely because of the aspects that he has additional to his own schemes why he lost. He is moderately impressive. He was outsmarting numerous factions, so he arguably had tier 2 level feats. So he is good enough, but he also has below tier 1 0.75 level weaknesses. He does not have good self-awareness. He's being re-educated for his emotional impulses and the like. Pushing 2 people off a cliff would never be anyone with good foresight would know how that's a flaw that could easily be exploited by anyone competent enough to do so. He already estimated Ayano Koji to be competent enough to do that, still did it anyway. Ishigami abstractly manipulated him too. Ishigami's not on this list because he's almost featless. His only feats are bullying Takuya, manipulating, deceiving with his handwriting against Horikita. He used Tsubaki and Riku Utomiya. He like reversed the manipulation onto Takia. That's really bad. That's a localized interaction too. We can't for sure say Ishigami is a tier 2 level character, so that is a nerf that keeps Takia in tier 1, aside from his many other reasons why he's tier 1. Dr. Frost, now he's the most interesting in this tier list, probably for tier 1. So Dr. Frost, the thing about Frost is mostly localized. He does have one feat where he destabilized something that was going to affect all of Korea, like Seong Moon's schemes, which are really complex schemes that are very good. Seong Moon's a monster of a character, but he's in his tier for his reason. He has really good feats, which we'll get to. But Frost is mostly localized. He can destabilize brainwashing. That's something unique that most characters can't do. Like, mind control doesn't have to be literal mind control. It could be done through neurolinguistic programming, and Dr. Frost can even take that apart. You can see it. You can see it before it's fully developed. But yeah, he grows to have emotions, but at first he had a weakness where he has no emotions. So he's a purely logical thinker. That means he has predictable thinking. But he is a genius. He can break down part-whole relationships really easily, causal relationships really easily, really high thinker. But that's obviously not enough. He is the highest psychological insight on this entire tier, if not even in this tier. He probably has higher insight psychologically, almost has the highest psychological insight in even the upper tier. That's just above this one. This is their authors, but this is meant to be one character called Ellery Queen. It's written by 2 authors. Golden Age Detective does have national cases, complex, where they have to... Well, actually, why am I even starting? I should talk about tier 2. So, tier 2 is what I call local global outsmarting. So, the scope is the manipulation of multi-agent systems spanning local, societal, or planetary dynamics such as politics, economics, or societal influence. So, much more complex systems than just games. Like, you can use games to have insights on broader systems. That would be like a microcosm to macrocosm analysis. So, where you think the small is a representation of the larger whole. But yeah, so it's much more complex. There's even analogies used, like 4D chess. That's an analogy that comes from the complexity of the system. Obviously, some characters take it too far. They take it where it's not an analogy, and that's literally what they are doing. But they're not on this tier, so we don't have to worry about them for now. Okay, so Ellery Queen. Well, yeah, so the key metrics for tier 2 are adaptation velocity, or AV, so that would be the speed. So keep in mind, there would still be the localized, so tactics, psychological insight, opponent complexity from tier 1, but tier 2 would have adaptation velocity, speed and efficiency, and shifting strategies dynamically, creative innovation index, or CII, so novel solutions to address complex systemic problems. And Ross Cole from tier 1 does engage in that, but he just does it. It's too long, takes too long, is outsmarted for quite a long time, like a mini Patrick Jane almost. Multi-agent complexity, MAC, so that's sophistication of the systems and agents being manipulated. So they're not doing one-on-one manipulations anymore for the most part. There is a character here that does it, and he was the interesting character I was talking about. They're manipulating entire systems now, and so that formula would be outsmarting is equal to AV plus CII times by MAC. Like I said, I can put all the information in the community post down below, like all the formulas, the grounding for the metrics, etc. If you just comment, if I get enough comments, if I see that enough, I'll put it down below. Or not down below, I'll put in a community post. I'll be more clean. Ellery Queen. So his cases are on the national scale, and they do require high adaptations for him to outmaneuver the killers. You can argue the lower ones do, but their cases are much more local scale. Like, his are nationwide cases that he deals with, Ellery Queen. And yes, Ellery Queen is a guy. Even though Ellery and Queen, you'd like think that's a woman, it's a guy. It does give me an interesting idea, but it's not relevant to this. Lord Peter Whimsy, pretty much the same thing. He has high complexity, multi-agent complexity. Ex-genius detective as well. He's like, so he's another Golden Age detective, Lord Peter Wimsey. He's interesting because he's an aristocrat, so he deals with like systems. He's kind of like Moriarty, but like in reverse, where he's a detective instead of a criminal. Yeah, that's him. William Afton, I was convinced by the doc that he does engage in this, but I also think he engaged in it anyway. There's multiple sets of murders, orchestrates he was trapped in a hellish state of mind, recovered from that. He comes back to life multiple times in multiple different ways, so he's currently alive as glitch trap, but he also survived him get basically a trap that was meant to end him for good. He even like got out of that. He's really good at adapting to circumstances, but he's also has his weaknesses, of course, his oversights, but he's never been caught. Advanced robotic technologies in his times in the 1980s, around then, the buy of 87, the buy of 83, 1983, 1987. Okay, but then he also like extends his influence like decades past. I think it was like 40 to 50 years beyond when he springtrapped Fazbear Frights, still engaging in the same criminal activity where he's killing kids for remnant. That's another aspect to him. He has high abstract reasoning because he's able to manipulate things related to the soul, which is remnant, which comes from trauma-induced suffering, essentially. So that's why he kills kids, to experiment on that, but then he kills kids for revenge. In the end, trying to bring back his own children. He does have... He seems easy to exploit, actually, by higher characters. Will Graham, he's like one step behind Hannibal, but he's also like on Hannibal at the same time. Not much to talk about Will Graham. This would be like composited Will Graham there, I think. There's another character, Clarissa Sterling, from the novels, and I think she's in a movie as well, who maybe could be on his tier list, but I didn't add her because Will's like the main Hannibal guy. But yeah, he has a superhuman empathy as well, where he essentially can literally reimagine the exact detailing of a crime. The Red Dragon, it was a pretty wide case that he tackles. So he tackles only federal cases, for the record. He's employed by the FBI, specifically Jack Crawford. But anyway, so yeah, he deals with federal criminals, essentially, and imagines exactly what they're going to do. But the only one aside from Hannibal he really deals with is the Red Dragon, like I said. But I don't think the Red Dragon is that impressive either, but he's probably more impressive than most of the characters Will goes against. It's more so just his interactions with him. So he's weird. I can't explain him. You kind of have to like know the context he's in to scale him. But yeah, that's Will. Tywin Lannister. So really intelligent guy. He set up he has high economical control to the point where the reason he's on the throne, the reason he's able to successfully get onto the throne and maintain the rulership of Westeros is because of his prior economical planning and maintenance, like really high. And then also the Game of Thrones in general is a really complex, and he's a high player in that complex game that spans realms, essentially. But well, it doesn't span realms. The Game of Thrones spans just Westeros, so that's why he's only tier 2, because it only affects Westeros. But he's a really intelligent character. Tyrion's his son. You could argue he should be lower, maybe. He's really intelligent. He is beyond Tywin at times. Really creative schemes. Don't really have much to say about Tyrion other than the fact that he could be below, but I think the Game of Thrones inherently has a multi-agent complexity built into it that he navigates. He's like the highest in the Game of Thrones, one of the highest. Obviously not the highest because it's high characters. Tsubasa Hanakawa. Now, she's a genius beyond belief, like high abstract reasoning. She instantly adapts to apparitions and defeats professionals in their fields while learning it, pretty much. She's also the smartest person conventionally in Japan. So she's like Yagami, pretty much, where she's top 1 in academics in Japan. and she gets perfect scores always, and the only time she doesn't get perfect scores is when they're wrong. She basically is beyond the examination board. So she's never wrong. It's just that the examination board has lower logical reasoning and lower order thinking than she does, to where she answers it incorrectly because essentially the whole test framework is wrong. But that's a localized, that's not relevant. That's like a tier 1 interaction. What's important is the apparition thing. The apparitions essentially they are global effects localized to particular situations, and that's what she deals with consistently, and like outsmarts the professionals in her field who deal with that consistently. And she's also able to match wits at times, or it's rather Ogi matching wits of her, but that's not Ogi's limit, isn't at her. But yeah, Tsubasa Hanakawa, Toya Shiro Yanagi. So the thing about Toya is he's really impressive because he's able to pretty much have a nationwide influence in the game itself. Like, if you made an analogy, that's what it would be for the system that the game's in. It's a really complex system with abilities. He has a really layered Dasein feudal-esque interaction with Akira Shiroyanagi, and so that's like a localized interaction within the greater multi-agent complexity, so that's like even better. Like the sophistication of just Akira alone probably qualifies for a multi-agent complexity if you like balance the scale. Yeah, not much to say about Toya. He's just like comparable wits to Akira, but he also is competing on that scale, so that's why he's there, not below. Because you can compare, obviously you can be like Dr. Frost, you can like match wits with someone like not consistently, but he does it consistently until he loses, obviously. Tokuchi Towa. So he's a very interesting character because you would think he's less intelligent because he doesn't deal with intelligent adversaries, but they're specialists. That's what he deals with. He deals with specialists in their domain. Rain game. That's like his most popular game in the anime. It's really sophisticated. It had so many layers to it. So yeah, high adaptation velocity. He kind of like engineers his plan so it looks like when he's running with a current strategy, he's actually running with another strategy that comes into play when that strategy fails. Yeah, he constantly deals with multi-agents on not just the baseball field, but he also like exploits the CEO as a whole to like become a billionaire. He's like one of the richest people in the verse, pretty much. And he also can deal with the darkness that the Liar game cannot overcome if you want to like take narrative portrayal into account. I don't think that matters. He's just really good in the 3 categories for tier 2. The Riddler, Edward Nygma, in Batman Hush, he outsmarted Batman, which was a huge anti-feat. Like, I don't mean outsmarted, like, he had one interaction. No, he was, like, consistently beyond him with an entire plan. He was 2 steps ahead every time. But that was at, like, peak Riddler. Riddler's, like, he's in Arkham Asylum for a reason, and then he basically has this need of recognition unless that's fulfilled, but he does it in localized. He set up localized contraptions pretty much. They're really difficult puzzles to solve, but they are just puzzles for the most part, and they're only linked to Gotham City. He doesn't really extend beyond Gotham. But Hush was like his best feat, but that's like going all out Riddler. He doesn't usually operate at that scale, so it's a good feat for Riddler, but it's an anti-feat for Batman. Because Riddler doesn't have any other higher than tier 2 feats. He's only affecting the society of Gotham. Penguin, same thing, controlling from the underworld though. He doesn't have any harsh Riddler level feats though. But he's just a consistent, like, he's so good that Batman has to deal with him. Think about that. Like, there are lots of crime lords in Gotham, but he's one that Batman specifically has to deal with. Well, he is insane for the most part. Like, if you look at him the wrong way, if he thinks you're laughing at him, like, he's gonna do the most sadistic shit to you. It's not relevant for outsmarting, but yeah, he does come up with complex schemes to like navigate his underworld dynamics. I don't think he's that creative though, but he is a genius in the multi-agent regard. And yeah, the other aspects. Actually, no, he does have novel solutions to address complex systemic problems in his context. Shikamaru Nada, not much to say about him. Not just going off of his IQ, going off of his feats. He's not localized to the battlefield like Minato, so he clears the standards for this. Sherlock. So not many people realize that what Sherlock does is he does deal with national cases like Bohemia, the Irene Adler. Like, that whole dynamic was national, on the national scale. He was manipulated for most of the series by Moriarty, but he's able to stand as, or rather fall as, an equal at the end. He's not equal to Moriarty, he's just able to catch up to him intellectually. Not in any other way, but he's pretty good. He has a good feat in the light novel too, where he's able to essentially synchronize his thoughts with Moriarty to execute their plan without having to speak to each other in a Russian roulette scenario. He's pretty good for tier 2. Sandang Glocta. He's navigating schemes on a kingdom-wide scale. Political kingdom scale. Not much. He's not that interesting. Poseidon, he's really bad actually. He's only tier 2 because he's tier 2 because of his portrayal. He is able to be ahead of Schofield, but that's because he is, once again, if you're ever ahead of Schofield, it's because you have better resources, but difference is Poseidon's actually performing at a tier 2 scale. Yeah. Patrick Jane, wanked character, completely wanked character. Like, for most of the series, he is on a localized scale, but he does end up, he's also outsmarted by Red John for decades, and across the entire series, Red John's always ahead of him until right at the end. Once he's freed from his trauma, he becomes a monster. Like, he's operating on a federal scale as well, consistently, easily ahead of the FBI as an organization. We can talk about Patrick's nuances. His mentalism is actually outdated. Like, if he tried to, the mentalism he used then is not accurate to the current day. So you could say if you put him in the current day, maybe he would adapt, but it's nothing cutting the edge per se. Like, he's not ahead of his time. So, because these characters, obviously, they can use current day techniques and then put them in the past, and then that would portray that they're like ahead of their time, but he's not. Yeah, but he is really good. He's really good at observational abilities, really good at applying his insights and experiences to his situations. He has a very mini, like, this is generous to say, a change the world level plot that he dismantles. He has high creative innovation, some of the highest, in fact, I'd say. But I don't think he's tier 2.5, he's just a tier 2. His main adversary is Red John, who you can argue is 2.5, but he loses to him for most of the series. He doesn't really go to a global scale or anything close to that. Navigates in those types of situations. Not much to talk about Jane. If you want to debate me on Jane versus 2.5 characters, I'll happily do it. Hercule Pyro. So he's really good. You can argue Pyro should be here, actually. You can argue he should be here. I'd be fine with it, to be honest. But yeah, he's here because for the most part his feats are Murder on the Orient Express and Death in the Nile. Those are like his best feats per se, and they are transcontinental feats. He's pretty much Sherlock. So think of Sherlock, he's pretty much the same thing almost, but he does have his nuances like psychological insight. Maybe he beats Sherlock in some aspects even. Yeah, that's Pyro. Guren Sayo. Not much to say about him. He's just like, he's pretty much if Sora was in Classroom of the Elite, but he was like, he didn't have any, that was disrespectful to Sora. I apologize. He's pretty much if you took No Game No Life's concept and then put it in Classroom of the Elite, and yeah, actually that's literally it. He does have, like, he is one-to-one statements with no game in life, like, they're all for low-key copied, but it is what it is. Yeah, he's good, but he does, the systems he navigates are tier 2 systems, so, yeah. Same with Itachi, the Konoha Massacre, etc. Not Konoha, what the hell am I talking about? Uchiha Massacre, navigating the Akatsuki dynamics. He's consistently a step ahead of his opponents with Genjutsu. But he has tier 2, so where he succeeds where Minato doesn't, he does operate in tier 2 systems, for the most part. Crocodile. People are like, why is a One Piece character this high? That's crazy! Well, it's about to get crazier when we get to him. You've seen him, but yeah. Crocodile, he's an he controls the One Piece underworld pretty much, for the most part. When he's alive, he's consistently creates organizations where they have significant influence. He created Baroque works, which took over an entire country. And the countries in One Piece, like the islands, are substantially bigger than they are in real life, just based on calculations you can make for how long seafaring takes in the One Piece world. For example, we have images as well of the One Piece planet, and then you can use that to calculate it to be way bigger. And Zunisha's like an inconsistency. His size always changes. Sometimes it's more accurate to the portrayal where the One Piece was larger. But anyway, the point is he consistently deals with multi-agent scenarios with creative schemes. Like, he's the one who came up with the cross guild scheme, which is it's essentially a global scheme. It's a tier 2.5 level scheme, but he's not tier 2.5 because he lost to he lost to a rookie pirate essentially. His schemes have been collapsed by small ripples that he should not be losing to. But yeah, he's consistently able to do Baroque works and cross guild. So the cross guild scheme is putting bounties on marines, and then creating a protection racket to where the civilians who kill the marines can now, not only can they get paid, they can join cross guild, so it gives them even more incentive to kill these marines and put a threat on the marines. And he's leveraging his position as an emperor of the sea to expand the influence, so it hits all corners of the world pretty much, this scheme. But then at the same time, it serves as a self-protection racket because the marines can't go off the cross guild because they're being hunted themselves. And it's also an emperor level crew, so it's hard to take down anyway. So it's really using his position really well. And the thing about Crocodile is he's came up with this all on his own. He's not in a pre-established systems. He is the one who created the system that he's working in, Baroque works and cross guild. And he has drip, so yeah, sue me. Conan keeps up with the Black Organization, which is a tier 2.5 system actually, if not higher, arguably, but he doesn't consistently interact with them. He kind of deals with it on a more localized case level. Does do nationwide cases though. Yeah, he has the skills to be in tier 2. Not higher though. Doflamingo Don Quixote. What's the reverse? It's Doflamingo. Yeah, Don Quixote Doflamingo. But technically his name is Doflamingo Don Quixote. Don Quixote is his family name. Former celestial dragon, from riches to rags back to riches, because he built up an empire on his own, leveraging his position as a warlord. So he has underworld influence. He has connections to an emperor, so that fortifies his perception, but it's also twofold. So he has protections from the marines. Technically they won't interfere with his affairs because at the time he was a warlord of the sea, which gives him diplomatic immunity. So he took over a country pretty much, came up with his scheme. He even adapts when his schemes are falling apart. So he's the most hated person in the country because his scheme, his like decade level manipulation, like was unveiled. So he adapted and put bounties knowing of the state of the country. So he put the country on execution, on timed execution, and then said, you can come after me or you can get paid and come after these people. And that's what he did. He put huge sums of money on those people. So he leveraged greed really well on a tier 2 scale. Dressrosa is unfortunately only a nation, so he's not as good as Crocodile is, but he's still good nonetheless. Christina Schofield, she's too reliant on pre-established systems, so she can outsmart Michael because she knows how she thinks, but she also gets outsmarted by Mahone, who have in tier 1. Yeah, a lot of hubris as well. She's like a rational sociopath, but then she also somehow has emotional weaknesses. That's really bad, honestly. Could get her lower. But she is tier 2. Like that, she doesn't come off as impressive, but she is tier 2. She was able to maintain strong economical plans, like tier 2, if not tier 2.5 level plans in the company. But she's relying on the pre-established system, so that's why she's not 2.5 and is tier 2. Because otherwise you can make the same argument, but better for Red John, who's doing that. It's only statewide influence, but yeah, he created the Blake Association himself, which is it's a really impressive feat, because he's a criminal who's running law enforcement. Essentially, he has moles all over law enforcement. He has high-ranking law enforcement officials being his pawns, and their lower tier pawns as well. They don't even have high places in his organization, so they'll never know who Red John is in case they betray the organization. He's done this for decades, consistently ahead of Patrick Jane with complex planning, huge foresight. He's a really underrated character. You could argue he's 2.5. You could argue he's smarter than PJ overall. But PJ, I do think PJ surpassed him in the Season 7. I think Season 7 PJ surpassed him. So it doesn't matter. So maybe you can even argue with Season 7 PJ's 2.5, but he consistently isn't that tier. So what do you want me to say? Like, it's arguable. I'm not saying these two specifically aren't fixed to this. These two and Crocodile could be higher. Lupin the Third, Master Thief. Not much to talk about Lupin. He's just like, he's like a Sherlock character, but for his own Master Thief archetype, essentially. Littlefinger, really complex schemes. He manipulated the entire kingdom pretty much subtly. Like, he's really patient. He's an opportunist at the same time. Really good at navigating chaos, so he's good at non-fixed scenarios. Yeah, non-fixed situations. He came up with a scheme to where he essentially uses his prostitution ring as passive information gatherers, so they get information from wealthy individuals, then they give that back to him, and then he controls it further. Peter Baelish. He orchestrated literally like most of the events in Game of Thrones, but novels Peter Baelish, not... Okay, so the show Peter Baelish would have too many weaknesses to be that high, but novels Peter Baelish is this high, or Littlefinger. Crollo Luciferi. Crollo, pretty good character, running the Phantom Troop. Yeah, he's really good at using his ability, which basically allows him to use other people's skills. He's, I think it's called Skill Hunter, if I remember correctly. But yeah, he comes up with a complex scheme to deal with Hisoka. He's dealing with Hisoka again, which should be interesting. He has the coolest Requiem, or coolest use of Mozart's Requiem to exterminate, well, to spin back on Evogan dying, which is one of the Phantom Troop members, because it's the way he structured the Phantom Troop is it's a spider, and he's just the head of the spider. Cut off the head, the rest of the body will still survive, so he cares more about the system he created. He literally created an eternal system, and his emotional engagement is tied to that system, so that's a really interesting character where his emotional engagement isn't internal, but it's external. It's based on a system he created, and it's based on outside of himself. I talked about Sandan Glocta already, but he manipulates the political systems of the Union, and outsmarts like a ton of characters easily. Like, he also has good interrogation intelligence gathering, because he is a torturer. That's what he is. Ben Beckman, this may be a confused position, but he is Safi, staying with scaling because we haven't seen him do much, but he is the brains behind the Red Hair Pirates and Emperor crew. The reason why it's impressive so he's Damon Wade's the highest IQ in the East Blue Saga, which is better than Nami, who can predict the weather patterns of basically the Grand Line, which is not predictable. You can't use external tools, so that's just her pure mind power doing that. Yeah, so, and he's higher than that. He's higher than Captain Kuro, the man with 100 plans. He has terrible execution, but he does have 100 plans for any situation. So by portrayal, that makes Ben Beckman higher. But why is Ben Beckman impressive? Well, the Red Hat Pirates are unique. Their fleet is terrible. It's truly terrible. It's full of weak crews that Shanks decides to protect. So they have to compensate with their main crew. Just so the other emperors are they have actual empires across the seas, but the Red Hat Pirates don't really have that. They just use their main crew. So Ben Beckman essentially have to compete with entire empires with just the main crew's resources and him managing that, because he's the brains behind that. So I think that's impressive. That's on a global scale too. I think once we actually get information on Ben Beckman, he'll be a 2.5 character, but because we don't have enough information, we can only make inferences based off his statements, like I just did. He's tier 2. Akagi Shigeru, really interesting character actually, really interesting. So the thing about Akagi is he's very, very localized. He doesn't have, I don't think he has any feats actually that are truly tier 2 and tier 2.5 in nature. However, they don't have to be. And the reason I say they don't have to be is because there's something called a sophistication caveat that I built into the system. And that's basically when the agents that you're going up against, or the scenario you're going up against on a localized scale, is sophisticated enough that it can qualify to be a comparable degree to a higher system, then I'll put you on that tier based off of that caveat. And that doesn't just apply to Akagi, it applies to a few other characters that are over here that we'll get to, that I accidentally skipped. But yeah, so Akagi's own intelligence combined with his opponent in his gamble with Washizu, who has insane luck. Literally, Akagi has to use his own intelligence and pure, I guess, like, resilience in gambling and learning ability to overcome. By the way, he's not even a professional Mario player. He just like learnt it. He's not that well. His experience is based off just playing the game. Like, he has insane learning ability, and that's another reason you can put him in that tier, because of his learning ability. Maybe you can put him higher, in fact, because of all these different factors. Maybe you can say, oh well, Akagi may not be performing in any of these systems, but truly, I think that's a really hard argument. Like, you need a huge burden of proof to make that argument to put him in 2.5. Because think about it, he should be in tier 1 if we actually took him out of his context and just took what he has, like his feats without the context. He'd be tier 1, but because he has the context, he's in tier 2. But you're trying to say that he should be in 2.5, which is an even higher jump. But yeah, he's very good. He's probably the best character in this tier. However, so that means he's stronger than any other character in this tier in most situations. I don't think I talked about Johan. We'll talk about him actually after this. But yeah, he went against luck itself. He's so proficient in what he does that he's practically a superhuman. Akagi. He'd probably beat most characters in any sort of gamble. Like, even higher tier characters. But unfortunately, he doesn't entirely qualify. Johann Liebert. So, Johan's downplayed in the regard that what he's good at isn't highly valued for some reason, even though what he's good at is blatantly extra. It's extra human, pretty much. It's superhuman, to the degree that he covers perceptions such as the soul. He has extrasensory perception, pretty much. He doesn't just cover the emotional and intellectual domains with his abilities. He doesn't have any powers. This is just raw intellect and emotional understanding and of human and existential understanding. He's another character. He's the reason I said now Rust, we only have one character with the existential factor. That was Rust. Yeah, Johan has that on this degree, so he is the existential factor here. And breaking someone's ideology may even be more effective. Like, that's connected to their identity. You're breaking them on an existential level, and that's more fundamental than manipulating them on a psychological level or something like that. And that's what Johann does. And even if Johann has nothing, like let's say you have nothing really that he can truly exploit, he will find something to exploit. He will create something for you to exploit. You made someone get addicted to money essentially when they had nothing else to exploit. So he'll just create that for you. And why he's truly tier 2 is his manipulations of Shuvod. Shuvod is a character who essentially controls the German economy and the European economy as a whole. And Johann's scheme, he gave up on the scheme eventually, but Johann controlling that scheme blatantly shows he has potentially up to tier 2.5 even level impact. But he gave up on that scheme once he got his memories back. He failed in Ruinheim, so that kind of like lowers him because it means that small unseen variables, that was like a very unpredictable variable, but it was one nonetheless, and that diminishes him from a 2.5 argument potentially. But he does have consistent like tier 2.5 and tier 2 arguments. So Underground Bank, that's another one that gets explored in another monster, and honestly that combined with his Kinderheim exploration in another monster, so Johann in the manga I'd say is a tier 2 Johann with another monster, you can argue is 2.5. And fuck you Servoid, because you didn't provide any insight on Johann whatsoever, you useless fuck. Kirito Kamui, so that was actually a bad pronunciation of his name. Kirito Kamui. Anyway, Kirito, he's, I don't know, he's not the Sword Art Online version, but I think comparing him to Makishima was disrespectful to Makishima. But he doesn't do, he's an effect. We'll get to Makishima and explain why Makishima is so impressive. But I don't think, I mean, I did see him, like, I wasn't in the community, but I occasionally get recommended videos, and I saw people putting Kamui above Makishima. And he's just nowhere close to Makishima, really. He doesn't do what Makishima does. But he's good enough to be, so this isn't just going to be me shitting on Kirito Kamui. Because he is good at what he does on a tier 2 scale. He's above a lot of tier 2 characters, potentially. Anyway, Iscaro Pust. So Iscaro Pust, he's from a series called Malazan, Book of the Fallen. And he essentially navigates these much more complex entities, such as Shadow Throne, who's a way higher tier than this. He's like, negotiates with him. He's just generally like, he attacks on a societal scale easily. Very smart character. Already talked about Kaito Kid, or I didn't talk about him, but I don't care to. Kanade, I'm not going to really talk about her much. Don't really care about her, but she is a character who benefits from the sophistication caveat. She benefits it more so because Danganronpa usually has two sides to where they're affected by external influence, so they're affecting the outside world and they're also navigating the complexities of the game, but they usually don't know they're affecting the outside game at first. But yeah, her plans are really, really complex. She's not just good at planning, she's high cognition, she's very good in every single way. The only thing that holds her back is scope of influence, high impact. She doesn't have high enough impact to be a 2.5 character. James Moriarty, the original one. So James Moriarty, he's overall better than Sherlock. He's like Red John, to where he built up his criminal empire that spans like continent. Like, he has continental influence, transcontinental influence, and he's navigating that systems like consistently. He orchestrated, like, the whole point of him is that he orchestrates. Honestly, he's arguably a 2.5 character, because he does So he's a spider that created a web where it connects all the criminals that Holmes was facing, essentially led back to him. And the criminals that Holmes was facing to begin with were nationwide threats for the most part, but I don't think Holmes consisted. Like, Holmes obviously had throwaway cases as well. But yeah. Transcontinental Criminal Empire. Matched wits one-on-one with Holmes, racking back fools. That's like the most famous one. Like, that's where his main feats come from. Feats. Everything else is like not his feats, but they upscale him. But he's at least tier 2, potentially higher. Let's just talk about Margase, since I'm keep flip-flopping. Margase is a very underrated character, very downplayed. She affects you on an existential level as well, actually. It's not just seduction. I don't think people have actually watched the show if they just say that. Like, she blatantly does attack you on a theological and existential scale, where she contrasts like evil good. In fact, how she manipulates Sasuke into killing himself isn't because she seduces him or psychologically abuses him. It's because she induces him on an existential scale. That's literally what she does. She breaks his ideology and he kills himself. Because, yeah, that was pretty much what she was doing. She was systematically, like, arranging these events on not just the statewide scale, but so she affected Japan, all of Japan, and then she affected the entire country of America, so which is a world superpower. So you can argue she's like should be 2.5, but the reason she's not 2.5 is because of her methods. Yeah, insanity inducement, she's really good at that. That's another factor not many people talk about. It's really overpowered. Like, you can't even outsmart someone if you're consistently dealing with hallucinations. Like, you need really high, not just emotional management, but you need self-control as well. You need psychological awareness, and you need to manage your mental health consistently against them. And that's just hard to do, because you have to balance cognitive resources to outsmart them, outsmart the system that you're in, while not trying to go insane against her. And if you start like turning schizo, then she's gonna manipulate you. It's really dangerous. Even characters like him can be affected by her. And as we've seen now, he's not a machine. He does have base urges. And that's it. She literally is the biblical whore of Babylon. That's what she is. That's not how I'm scaling. I'm just saying, like, symbolically. Let's see, Shinichi Akiyama. So Akiyama, he was a wank character for a long time. He's wanked on the basis that he's a really logical guy, man. Like, his schemes are so logical and they're so realistic that I could shake his hand right now in real life. That's pretty much Akiyama. That's why he was wanked, but people over time have realized he's not really all that. But he is very good though, don't get me wrong. Like, he's tier 2, he's a high tier 2 for a reason. And that's because it's consistently, like, has these layered schemes. So he only performs well for the most part in structured scenarios, but it is neglected, but he can do well in non-structured scenarios. He beat a multi-step pyramid scheme type of organization, so it had huge influence pretty much, and he took it down. He got arrested though, so it wasn't perfect. He wasn't able to do it undetected. Someone like Johan would be able to do that undetected. He has done that before, actually, with his underground bank. But yeah. Is Johan better than Akiyama? Well, maybe we'll talk about it another time. But, well, actually, if I said Johan's tier 2.5, it's pretty obvious what I think about it. But anyway, yeah, Akiyama's really good. He did go a stream diff against Yokoya, and like, that might actually be an anti-feat if you stretch it, because Yokoya is pretty bad. But yeah, like, Yokoya, he's gifted enough to be on this tier list, but he has really bad performances in a lot of areas and things that just happens. But Akiyama is the guy who beat a guy with perfect information in a multi-agent situation. That's what the Three Kingdoms are. That's what that situation was. He was able to bring it to a stalemate and essentially force the stoppage of the Liar game. So yeah, pretty good character overall. Multi-dimensional outsmarting. What more can you ask for? Well, what more can you ask for? He has a weakness. It's the darkness, and people like Johan, once again, I hate to keep going back to people like Johan. Even people like Red John can exploit this stuff. Like the systematic rot or corruption that's like present. You can't really deal with it on a huge scale. And these other characters can. I guess that's the point. Because he is just pretty much a normal guy. He has... People use Route A, but they didn't realize, like, the whole point of Route A was... He doesn't have, like PJ wouldn't be able to tell that guy was immediately not guilty. Akiyama isn't able to do that. PJ's really cracked at emotional intelligence. Detective Chimp. I can't believe I let this guy get wanked to no game, no life levels, but I did. He obviously deals with supernatural investigations. He's obviously extremely intelligent. When it comes to raw outsmarting, he's not that good. He doesn't deal with anything beyond the tier 2 scale. Akira Shiroyanagi, since I didn't talk about him really, he cleared a system that existed for 1,000 years undefeated. Supernatural system even. Maybe Akira could go a bit higher. Maybe not. Defeated his father, who had equal wits to him in multi-dimensional outsmarting, layered back and forths. He's a really creative character. He anticipated in a scheme that anticipated his death. He's downplayed because not everything's spitballed out for us, I guess. I'll happily debunk any of the things I'll use to present against him. I'll like debunk them myself. Good luck trying to like reverse debunk that. But yeah, Akira. It's tier 2 character, could be tier 2.5, probably will be 2.5 when battle game in 5 seconds concludes. Yeah, I think we've talking about everyone apart from Kokichi, Light, Koji, Orochimaru, and B. So we'll talk about Orochimaru first. Orochimaru, really, he's like probably one of the most intelligent characters in Naruto, but outsmarting encompasses more than just like being an intellectual per se. But Orochimaru does have enough to where he's able to navigate the ninja world quite effectively to a tier 2 degree. So he's still sustainable in outsmarting. It's not just a intellectual one trick, and those do exist, of course. I beg upon starting this list because I thought he was one originally, but you can analyze Egghead Island and you can potentially get Egghead Island to a tier 2 level at least, but like Vegapunk's actual intellect would be way higher than tier 2, but he's not being outsmarted, he's not that tier. So I didn't think there was any point of putting him. I wanted to focus more on the One Piece characters that actually engage in outsmarting. But yeah, Orochimaru, he isn't just a mad scientist. He does scheme a lot. And he does navigate these multi-agent systems. Who next? We'll talk about Kokichi. So with Kokichi, he has a sophistication caveat, but he also kind of doesn't need it, because the implications were, even though it's fabricated, the implications were that the game essentially had ramifications on a global scale outside of itself. I don't think Tsumigi's anywhere close to Junko as a character in outsmarting or intelligence, for that matter. So, yeah. But Kokichi really layers schemes. When we talk about the tier 2 metric, maybe he qualifies for it, maybe he doesn't. I think it's safe to put him into tier 2. Not much to say outside of that. Because you kind of need the context. He like has his scheme is from like chapter 2 all the way to chapter 5, and it even goes beyond in some ways. Like he still affects things in chapter 6. Even after spoiler alert, he planned his death. to make an unsolvable case, and it would have been unsolvable. He factored in, he pulled a mini Lelouch as well against Schneisel. Like the thing that Lelouch did against Schneisel, Kokichi did a relative, if not more impressive version of that. But we'll get to Lelouch. You guys are probably wondering why he's not in this tier. But we will get to Lelouch. So who's next? So I can talk about either Light or Ayana Kochi, and I think we'll talk about Beyond Birthday before I forget about him. B is okay, so B does affect tier 2 systems. For starters, he literally made L make an exception. That was a feat in and of itself for L to make an exception to his rule. Didn't qualify for the L. For the record, L level cases are usually, so they need a certain amount of victims, or there needs to be $1 million on the line. Not Jamaican dollars, not Zimbabwe dollars, not any other like American US dollars. But yeah, he made L break that exception because there was a personal commitment, and he's Whammy's B, but L obviously has godly intuition to know that that's Whammy's B getting his attention. He pretty much had the case solved from the start. We're not going to get into L right now though. But B, he still nearly managed to win despite all the odds stacked against him. He came up with a cipher that, well, the no law enforcement official, like they thought it was a joke. That's how difficult it was to comprehend. But that's more of a VCI feat. Was able to like go back and forth with L's wits. Yeah, he wasn't on the same level, but they were pretty much both manipulating Naomi Misora over and over again, and like moving them ahead for their own schemes. Really complex schemes. Schemes are complex enough to net him into tier 2. He is an L level criminal. But, and when you analyze his feats, then yeah, maybe you can make a case he's smarter than Light, but I don't think I agree with that. Light Yagami, do we talk about him, or Ayana Koji Kiyotaka? Kiyotaka Ayana Koji, maybe. Ayana Koji, yeah, we'll talk about Ayana Koji because this will be like the last Classroom of the Elite character. Ayana Koji is the apex of the Classroom of the Elite verse. So I'm not scaling by potential, so we won't do a theoretical Prime Minister Ayana Koji, but when we scale by potential, we can factor in his White Room adaptation. So he overcame a system and like completely deceived a system even that was designed, that was like 3 to 4 stages beyond peak human limitations, but it's only a cognitive system, so it's very localized on one hand, but he did overcome that system, but it was a complex system. So okay, so what he did was a tier 2.5 level feat, but the system itself exists on a localized scale, and that's the nuance with code. They present higher tier systems on lower tier scales, so it's a tier 1 scale, but it's a tier 2.5 system, and that's what Ayana Koji overcame as a child, pretty much. Like, he had the White Room cleared, they had nothing left for him well before he graduated from it by force. He graduated by force from the White Room because of the temporary shutdown. But yeah, like, he was ready to be a White Room educator essentially, so they could create more of him, because he's the standard, he's the gold standard of the White Room, to the point they view him as a deity. And now none of these factors are relevant. We should actually get into his outsmarting, because this is just one scenario, you could say. Now, he navigates NHAS, he basically manipulates the entire 3 years pretty much, like from Kiriyama, well, that's Nagumo's year, but he does navigate Horikita Manabu briefly, and when I say 3 years, it's when Nagumo's year becomes number 1 and Takuya's year is introduced. That's when he starts puppeteering across the 3 years. He's mainly focused on his own year though, for his class transfer strategy, X, manipulating or ruling for a considerable amount of time, like 6 months, something like that. Just puppeteering him through people, so he has layers and layers of multi-agent outsmarting through the X strategy. Rumor strategy did the same thing with Ichinose, but his Ichinose class, he essentially created a puppet state in class D, well, Horikita's class and Ichinose's class. He did have an unseen variable that he didn't expect Ichinose to do what she did in the most recent volume. Low-key and anti-feat. I'm not going to take it as a serious anti-feat, but it does prove he has base urges, and it proves that he could be exploited by someone like Imagase. Like, yeah, it would be difficult. We're not saying it would be easy, but it is possible. It's possible to get an easy win against Ayanokoji off of that. Like, way easier than it should be through it. He has weaknesses in regards to where he has rigid thinking, where he essentially spits out what he knows. He doesn't transform it. He synthesizes concepts, don't get me wrong. And he has high levels of ingenuity, but he can't create. He doesn't have like Einstein levels of creativity. I don't know if creativity is the right word. Maybe it's innovation. He's not innovative in the way Ryulen is. That's why he's interested in Ryulen, whose thinking is like modeled completely differently, but Ryulen is an easily controllable variable. So he's controllable and he presents an unknown. Someone like Koenji is not controllable even though he presents an unknown. And yeah, so Ayanokoji, really good character. He steps ahead of like a lot of tier 1 characters at the time. They're very competent individuals, so he gets that opponent complexity from tier 1 that amps him up. He has it on a multi-agent scale, so that's tier 2. You can decide for yourself whether he's tier 2.5, whether or not he beats Light for yourself. I think he's just tier 2 though. He needs a bit more in the gas tank to be tier 2.5. However, on the other hand, with Ayanokoji, I will make Light and Ayanokoji potentially in the future. But we'll see. So Light Yagami, I don't think I skipped anyone else. Light should be the last character we're dealing with. Some would say one of the main characters of SED, along with Ayanokoji. Light Yagami, well, everyone knows about Light, but I guess no one refers to the intricacy of Light. He was able to turn the Death Note. The interesting thing about Light is we saw the Death Note in other people's hands, so we actually know he's the one who made it a level 2.5 weapon. It was his genius that elevated it. He used that resource to elevate his outsmarting, to compete in a 2.5 system, to compete against such a high level opponent like L. Yeah, he would get demolished by L if it wasn't that very specific scenario, but he's still able to fight on that level with the literal, objectively world's greatest mind. Not world's greatest intelligence, world's greatest mind. Like, that encompasses the entire mind. Like, it's the most high quality mind to have existed. And there's a lot of nuances with L that not many people know about as well, even regarding 515 and stuff like that, but I won't talk about that now, and I won't talk about that probably in its tier list, because it's not for me to talk about. Yeah, Light, very good character. He was able to adapt against 2 impressive opponents. Like, at the same time, investigative wise, they're meant to like match L. We know they're not intellectually or on L's level in any other way, but as an investigator they match L, or surpass L even by their own words. And he was able to overcome them. They only beat him by pure luck. While he was holding back, while he was lazy, he was able to essentially cannibalize all of L's resources, become the new L and the new Watery, simultaneously navigate those roles, which is high cognition as well. Some of the highest adaptation velocity in the tier against 3 superhuman geniuses. One of which is substantially, not just a genius in the fact of cognition, but is above him in every other way as well, for the most part, to the point where Light's own individuality is what he has to leverage. Like, he has to work with such precise materials to stand a chance in this scenario. And yeah, he has an overpowered weapon, and yeah, he has a death god, but he manipulated that death god himself, exploiting the fistive things. And no, he's not perfect. He has weaknesses that can be exploited, and that's what makes matchups against him interesting. He's very strong, but he has weaknesses, such as his god complex, and he gets bored if it's like too easy. So maybe a character like Iona Koji acts like he's like pretty much trash. So like maybe if Light doesn't catch on to that early enough, then Iona Koji can like cook up something. Like, it's an interesting matchup. I will talk about it. I guess for that video, the code guys can provide me their insights. I'm happy to listen if you think there's anything I need to know. And same with the Death Note, people who scale Light can provide me their insights if they think that I'm missing something with Light when I make that video. Yeah, I'm gonna make that video, as it's just about the when, whether I make it the 40 Omniscience video or not. But that's neither here nor there. We're here for the tier list, so let's continue. The legendary, the GOAT himself, this is Glazing, Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He actually got mad that Sherlock Holmes was so popular because it took away from his occult stuff and his other areas of academic interest, like instead of his literary pursuits and success with Sherlock Holmes. But anyway, before we talk about Sherlock, we have to talk about tier 2.5. So tier 2.5 is global outsmarting. So tier 2 is local global outsmarting, and tier 2.5 is global outsmarting. So it extends tier 2 to fully global systems, integrating elite multi-agent dynamics and layered strategies. So now you can recognize that some of those tier 2 characters you can argue could be tier 2.5, but it's very hard to argue that. Like, you need good arguments for that. So the categories that get added to 2.5 would be Systemic Foresight, which is SF, so you can create a formula. Ability to anticipate long-term outcomes across multiple agents and systems, and someone like Iona Koji does do that. Creative Innovation, so it continues from tier 2, but it's applied to a higher scale. So this is where a lot of the tier 2 characters fail. They don't have it on a global scale for the most part. Their creative innovation, if at all. Opposition complexity, sophistication of opponents require layered strategies. So yeah, the formula is outsmarting is equal to Systemic Foresight SF, add CII, which is creative innovation, times by opposition complexity. So it's the same thing, but just scaled higher, pretty much. So it's not that nuanced. And yeah, Sherlock has that. So the reason he's here specifically, he dismantled Moriarty's criminal empire in the end of Reichenbach Falls, was at the end of Holmes. Yeah. But why he's here, Hounds of Baskerville, it's that case specifically why I think he definitely deserves to be here. Because that case, Holmes had to overcome a weakness of himself, and Hounds of Baskerville was such a complex case that was considered to be supernatural in nature. It wasn't supernatural, but that's how complex the case was. And because of such complexity, I think that has tier 2.5 complexity in combination with his Reichenbach Falls feats, with him coming as the victor in that. This is the Ravages of Time character. That's Yulang, I believe. Not gonna bother with talking about them. They're high. All the Ravages of Crime characters, there's like a bunch of them, and like most of them are Uso Gui Slayers. Yeah, another Ravages of Time character, will skip him. William James Moriarty. Now, I think he's pretty underrated, personally. The British Empire, he destabilized it from within, and that was when it was at its peak. And in Moriarty the Patriot, it's even more impressive, because Moriarty the Patriot elevates its impressiveness. Like, Moriarty himself is a superhuman guy, and the British Empire's people like Mycroft Holmes, who is a superhuman himself, like, he no-diffs Sherlock Holmes in intellect and in outsmarting in general. Like, he's like 600 and something to like minimal wins. I don't even think Sherlock's beaten him actually in those games. Yeah, he's way above him. Moriarty is able to navigate that dynamic easily. He has a criminal empire all over London, England, and England in general. He actually, I'm pretty sure he is cross-country influence even before the end of Moriarty the Patriot. He's planned from 10 years, perfect execution, never fails really. He never fails actually, there's not a single time where he's failed. Then with the light novel, so I think he could be 2.5 or even before he reaches this, because he does like destabilize a global system with his own intelligence. Like, he's used all the resources he has, he created himself, and it's not even that much. Like, it's nowhere close to the resources the British Empire has. He martyred himself, but he didn't martyr himself because he wasn't a martyr. He made Sherlock Holmes the hero while he was the villain, and that like destroyed the aristocracy. Anyway, yeah, and then you have like terrorist feats, which like, that's not actually in terms of complexity and creative innovation and systemic foresight. So it covers most of the categories apart from creative innovation, because it's obviously not a global system, but the other, it's tier 2.5 in the other categories though, so that's fine. Yeah, very impressive character. He's like very versatile. I don't think there's a single category he's bad at. He's good at everything. In general, like in the old way Outsmarting was scaled, he's good at everything, and in a new way, he's good at everything as well. So yeah, just a strong character in general. Very impressive version of Moriarty, and he could go higher. He could beat characters that he doesn't beat in this tier. I don't know if he'll get to tier 3. Maybe he will. I doubt it, but yeah. Not really sure what he can do that's already on that level, like what situation. I don't know if Moriarty the Patriot is going to be like Ravagers of Time, where they combine eras. But yeah, Victorique, broken character, absolutely broken. You can even just go on the Go Sick wiki if you want. I'm not really sure if anyone's gone on even knows who Victorique is. She's a broken intellectually. Practically like has infinite cognitive capacity. She does deal with pretty much supernatural cases. Yeah, it's mainly the light novel though. I can't read Japanese yet because I haven't tried to learn it yet. I will eventually. I'll get around to it, and I read the light novels to solidify our position in. But yeah, just based on what I've seen alone, she's 2.5. She could be higher. Zetsu, he's literally manipulated the history of the Naruto world and aligned that with Kaguya Otsutsuki's like resurrection, you could say. Completely manipulate Madara, who himself is a multi-agent. Like, Madara is arguably tier 2 and had no idea like about Zetsu's schemes. He manipulated literally a bunch of tier 2 characters. Like, he has to be tier 2.5. He is like very high opposition complexity. Like, he accidentally has layered strategies just because of his interactions with them, because he has to have those. Like, it's built in to his interactions with them because they're already tier 2. Underrated character, he's tier 2.5. T-Hall Benedict, he's another Malazan character. He manipulates tier 2.5 systems on an economical scale. Not much to say about him. It's probably more I could talk about, but I'm not really interested. Tanya, she used to deal with a lot of military efforts that do affect on a global scale, while also interacting with the supernatural X, being X, who is God. She has to adapt to magical systems while coming from the real world. That aspect, if the magic is sophisticated enough, could put you higher, have her lower right now. Tier 2.5. Superior Iron Man, he's pretty much Iron Man if he's a manipulator. So Tony Stark's weakness is like he doesn't engage in the significant outsmarting model enough. So I just put Superior Iron Man, who does do that, effects on a societal scale. Sister Sage from The Boys. just watch The Boys, I guess. She does work on a global scale. Another averages of time character, he's not the relevant one. In fact, even the relevant one I'm not going to talk about. Siesta, underrated character. I accidentally nerfed her to the ground because she's being compared to Sora. She's nowhere close to Sora. As you can see, she's tier 2.5. So, relax. She deals with, the whole point of Returners is that they deal with complex global threats consistently. That's literally their whole job, is to deal with consistent global threats. People say she defeated an omniscient alien. No, she didn't. The alien had awareness of potential worlds, but the Ace Detective role literally gives you that built-in, and she also had that level of knowledge herself at the time she had red tomes, because she's charismatically has a relationship with the Oracle, who's the ones who writes down these sacred writs, or these sacred books, which is kind of like the Book of Wisdom from ReZero. But yeah, so she already had that level of knowledge. She got outsmarted brutally by Arsene. So she actually can, societal manipulations do kind of she struggled with. In the novel I stopped because I dropped the novel, I got bored of it. But yeah, she's very impressive. She can see around 10,000 different potential world lines. That's built into her. She plans for her death 3 years before it happens. So really high creative innovation, really high systemic foresight. There's no way she should never be on this level, but she's only doing it on a global scale. She doesn't go beyond that, as far as I've seen. We'll talk about Peter Wiggins. Yeah, so he's from Ender's Game. You might have heard of it as a movie, but it's a novel. He essentially takes on this persona called Locke and then manipulates on a political and societal scale, tier 2 scale, tier 2.5 scale, sorry, pretty easily. And Ender's Game is interesting because it's an interstellar conflict, and yeah, he's not as smart as Ender in some regards and overall, but he's smart in his own way and smart enough to be here. His sister Valentine can probably be tier 2 or tier 2.5 as well. And she pretty much does the same thing, almost. He's just very charismatic, which is not, obviously that's not a category here. But yeah. Another averages of time character, we'll skip them. Pandora's actor, I'll come back to, so I'm going to come back to Pandora's actor, Schneisel. There's characters I'm saving, pretty much. Ozymandias, let's actually talk about him. I think he's very wanked. I have to take some water. I'm talking for so long. So Ozymandias, what do we have for big odds? So he does easily execute a scheme. It's some of the highest creative innovation I've seen, to be fair, to where he takes. So he has a lot of knowledge, not just encyclopedic knowledge. He has more knowledge than someone like Ayano Koji because he dips into cultural aspects as well. And that's very high. So with Ozymandias, he easily executes a scheme to where it's pretty much what characters like Lelouch and Sailor Moon are aiming for, where the hatred is focalized, it's focalized onto one concept and create an alien monster for that purpose. But the difference with him is manipulated superheroes. They're not superhuman. They're superhuman, but they're not actual superheroes. They're not DC level superheroes. They're pretty ordinary, apart from Dr. Manhattan. And now this is where the wank begins. People use Dr. Manhattan to wank him to absurd degrees, but Dr. Manhattan is in an inherently deterministic, if not super deterministic system, to where that would have happened no matter what. He literally exists, his perception exists before Ozymandias, and Ozymandias did exploit it perfectly, but at the same time, he always was going to exploit it, because that's just how Dr. Manhattan's philosophy works, and how he works, seeing it non-linearly. if you see the end of Watchmen, like Ozymandias' reaction to what Dr. Manhattan says is like proof enough that he's not on those scales. Like, he just isn't. And that's his only feat too. It's definitely not consistent, even if you want to say he like has those feats. He definitely doesn't consistently operate off of a 2.5 scale. Unless there's something I haven't seen, of course, like in... Because I know there's another Ozymandias... I read the Watchmen comics, but I didn't read the, like, his personal comic. I don't know if he appears in DC. And Dr. Manhattan appears in Doomsday Clock. But he doesn't. As far as I'm aware. But yeah, but he's good. He's very good, very good. Very high level, 2.5 character. Luna Lafayette, she's like one of the world's greatest minds on Earth, on a global scale. Does engage with technological prowess on those scales. She's not just an intellect merchant, or if she is an intellect merchant, her intellect's way higher than this tier. But she herself is not. Moon Girl. Michael Schofield, some people for some reason think like Patrick Jane's comparable to him. He's not. He'd give him a good fight, of course. Tier 2.5 is not, for some characters, like Tier 2.5 isn't a whole like jump above, it's a 0.5 for a reason. It's just slightly higher systems. But yeah. Schofield, so he's always on the back foot as well, is the thing. He's against tier 2.5 with people with 2.5 level influence like Poseidon and his own mother, Christine Schofield, and he consistently outmaneuvers them, and he's always steps ahead of them, which is really impressive. Even Mahone, like, he FBI, like, that's a federal level influence, able to outmaneuver them. This, he consistently breaks down complex systems, like each prison he escapes through is more complex than the last. From Fox River to in Panama to the last prison he's in. Obviously there are ways to confine Michael, but I don't think he's ever in a true Supermax prison where he's solitarily confined in his 24-hour watch, like basically subjected to inhumane degrees of confinement. Like, we haven't seen him break down a system like that because there isn't much to break down. Someone like Theodore could escape from that still, but he's no Theodore. But he is really good at what he does. Michael Schofield, like, has consistent, and he doesn't take decades to outsmart the opponents either. Like, Red John's ahead of PJ for decades. Christina Schofield isn't ahead of Michael for decades. She's ahead of him for like, what, a few weeks? Poseidon, yeah, Poseidon isn't ahead of him for decades. He was just trapped for decades, which is a difference. Because as soon as he's actively like engaging in outsmarting with Poseidon, like, he like dismantles him. And people, he has a really good feat which people find really impressive. At the end, I don't find it as impressive as they probably do. I actually don't know how impressive they think it is, but it wouldn't work. Basically, it has the friend problem, where it requires a less sophisticated version of our own Earth for it to be impressive. This is Mara of Akoma. Yeah, she's a 2.5 character. Not going to talk about her. She's unknown, but that's her name, so you can research her. This is Lord Havelock Vetinari. He's really good because he manipulates tier 2 systems, but his level of complexity in his planning and just his general engagement in outsmarting elevates him to tier 2.5 easily. He's probably like one of the best characters who would be in proven ability if you like analyze him under that method. He's from a novel called Gate, which is in the Discworld universe. But yeah, he's very good. Arnim Zola, I'm not going to talk about him, another Marvel character. He's a Nazi scientist. Take that information as you will. Kirei Kote Nine. Yeah, navigates Fate Zero and Fate's Day Night, Grail Wars. Engages with a really intelligent opponent, Amasuka Shiro. That version of Shiro would be in this tier 2.5, but I'm not using that version of Shiro on the tier list. The other version of Shiro from Fate Grand Order is much higher. Wait, why did I say Shiro? Yeah, that is his name, never mind. Wait, no. Kitsurugi, yeah, Kitsurugi. My bad. Amasuka, anyway, that's his name, Amasuka. But yeah, really devious manipulator. He has the existential aspect to him as well. Really evil character, great antagonist, but we're not talking about writing here. Yeah, the Grail War is a complexity on this scale. Maybe you can even get him even higher to tier 3 maybe. But he's tier 2.5 for now. Edmond Dantes, not going to talk about him, but he is 2.5. You already know. I'll let Saj talk about Edmond Dantes since that seems to be his favorite character. Or one of his favorites. Koro Sensei, a really underrated character because his verse in general is underrated. I'm trying to make sure. I thought it was a character from Assassination Classroom that should be in this tier. But he's missing right now. Oh no, he's right here. He's right here. I'm blind. Oh my god. I'm literally... This is what happens when you look at a hole instead of the parts. You just become blinded. Koro Sensei, yeah. So he steps ahead of other 2.5 level characters, like 10 steps ahead. He has some of the highest creative innovation on this list, surprisingly. But you wouldn't think that, but he does. Easily, like, leverages a global system. Like, this guy Gakuho has 2.5 level systems on a political and societal scale. Can do nothing, absolutely nothing to Koro Sensei in that same scale, and I guess that qualifies enough. He's basically Nagumo if Nagumo was like a global manipulator. Sherlock from the BBC. So BBC Sherlock is like a higher version of Sherlock because his intelligence is like superhumanly exaggerated, and because of that he gets downplayed because his reasoning seems absurd and like complete BS. And if you break it down, it is complete BS a lot of the times, and the ones that aren't are stolen from the novels, funnily enough. But the scenarios he's in does have 2.5 complexity, especially when he's against Eurus Holmes, when he's against Moriarty. Moriarty has global influence, for the record. He dismantled, outsmarted him, was layers ahead, had 3 possibilities against him for his death plan. He is good enough to be here. I'll talk about him further if like anyone thinks that's contentious. Another Ravages of Time character, Conky from Kingdom, psychotic strategist. I did not expect to see him in SCD, to be fair. My friend recommended Kingdom to me and I was reading it and really enjoying it. But yeah, Conky, probably one of the best strategists in this tier. If not the best, actually. He probably is the best strategist in this tier. Actually, no, he's not. He's not better than this guy right here, and this guy. Yeah, the Ravages of Time characters, pretty much. But yeah, Conky's good overall. He's in the Warring States period. Superhuman strategist in that period. Affects multiple regions in that period. The I would consider China and the Warring States in general to be of a global system, and that's where he navigates. Brian Finch, he does have, he's not as ruthless as Eddie Mora, he's not on the level of Eddie Mora, but he's still very good. He like catches all the most wanted criminals in like a week or something absurd. It was really absurd. It might have even been a day. So like you can see he's like levels above characters like PJ. They all the most wanted criminals on the FBI most wanted list he like caught in a day or something like that. And he did it by using synesthesia, something he learned on the spot from someone, something he just wanted to try. So he really is high creative innovation. That's not when he has it on a global scale there. So we can't really use that. But it's just an interesting feat to think about. It's mainly at the end. It's at the end of the conflict where everyone has the drug, NZT, which is what gives you like 4-digit IQ. It lets you use all of your brain. It's stupid as fuck because it like doesn't neuroscientifically work like that. And nootropics like could be better than that without like being inaccurate, because there's actually would exist. But anyway, regardless of the logistics, he is a very good character on that scale. This is Etmada from The Queen's Thief. That's the novel. Yeah, she's on this scale. She's an assassin as well. Or that's like the context she operates in. This is Gelbin from World of Warcraft. He's on the scale on a technological level. That's Seto Kaiba. Do you think he's too high? He could be higher actually, like maybe of scaling to put him higher. He's a very strong character there. Very smart. He's very high. He easily has global level creative innovation. Some of the highest creative innovation on this list too. Maybe not as high as like Gelbin. He's probably higher. Yeah. Jastor Gallywix. He's basically like a landlord who exploits single mothers, and that's not what he actually is, but that's an analogy for him. But on a global scale, like the systems he operates have global levels of complexity. That's Darrow from Red Rising, or it's like supposed to be Darrow. Which just reminded me, I haven't. That's Eugenides, by the way. I think I skipped him. That's a Ravagers of Time character. This is Guardia. Probably butchered that. There was supposed to be. Darrow reminded me of these other two characters. So either I have them in a higher tier, or I somehow misplaced them, or skipped over them. I have no idea where the Jackal is and his sister Mustang. They would probably be around here as well, but I can't. I think I don't know where they are. Yeah, Eurus Holmes easily on this tier. It would be ridiculous for her not to be here. She came up with a plan to exploit I think it was years later. It might have been months later, but I think it was years later. To basically get Sherlock and Mycroft in this game. She came up with that plan in 5 minutes, a 5-minute conversation with Moriarty. She's able to predict things like 3 separate terrorist attacks just using Twitter alone. Like she's literally in a confined facility using Twitter, just making predictions, making abstract foresight predictions. She could arguably go higher. Crazy manipulator, she has better manipulation than Johan, arguably. Complete brainwash and insanity inducement. So she's like Margase as well. Very good deception. Like she can basically become other people. That's how good her attention to detail to her disguise is. We didn't talk about disguise, but Kaito Kid has that as well, but on less complex systems. But that's not really a category here. El Elliot. will save him. Ravage of Time character, Hal. Everyone knows about Hal. There's a lot of docs about Hal. Same thing with Hannibal. But there's an interesting debate. I will talk about Hannibal eventually on this channel, but I'll talk about him in the context of him versus PJ, since that's apparently a controversial topic. You can see I don't think it's controversial, but maybe that's like TV Hannibal. This is like composite Hannibal. Very dangerous character either way. Lalo, I should talk about Lalo. Ideal as an organization which he built up does have, essentially, Kakura cannibalizing Ideal made it a global influence organization. But anyway, yeah, the political and economical systems that Lalo deals in, basically to manage that, does require that level of complexity in the systems. And his short selling stock strategy, that's a tier 2 level strategy, but it's still good reason to believe for why Ideal, because Ideal is a tier 2.5 organization and he built it himself, like Red John built the Blake Association. And then he was able to fight Hao and Baku, or Hachin and Naoki. Well, he was Hao actually, he wasn't even Hachin and Naoki, he was Hao. He was able to fight Hao and Baku at the same time for a while in Protoporus. He does lose, obviously, because of Baku's like insane. We don't even need to talk about Baku either, but he's here. This is composite Tyler Durden. He does, Project Mayhem does have a 2.5 level of impact, and he broke that down from something as simple as the Fight Club and then upscaled it. It's also a historical level feat, so it's meant to be on the level of something like a Great Depression, but like way more impact than that. In Fight Club 2, he essentially becomes a mimetic virus. That's why I have composite Tyler Durden. This isn't meant to be the narrator, this is just Tyler Durden specifically. For some reason Tyler like has autonomy and agency. I have no idea why. Well, he's a meme, and he like has planned, he's basically possessed the narrator's grandfather, and there's a whole plot line to do that, and he's going to possess the narrator's son after he like the narrator got freed from his influence, but that didn't work out. But anyway, that was like the plot line of Fight Club 2, which is it's a comics, that's why no one's really read it. But his mimetic influence does eclipse a global scale. Just a copycat Tyler Durden is able to get to a global scale, and obviously him and the narrator outsmart and beat that guy. Spoiler alert. He is easily a 2.5 character. I can probably elaborate on him in like a debate or something, if like I debate someone on like, I don't know, Baku against Tyler Durden, just any of these characters. Makishima, he's downplayed, but he deserves his downplay. His downplay is because it's hard to see what he does in the TV show, because it's a TV show. But in the novels, I heard that's like fixed. Like obviously this all shown how he destabilizes the Sybil system, which is it's in the 22nd century system with hundreds of thousands of supercomputers powering it, and basically perfect psychopaths' brains. So it's like perfect rationality as well, and it can do crazy shit, honestly. Like it's complete societal and political control, and it's good enough to make Japan a world superpower to a global scale. And he completely collapses it through layered plans that encompasses multi-agents from the Public Safety Bureau, if I remember the organization correctly, the hunting dogs, that's what Kogami is, I believe. It's been a while, but yeah, steps ahead. Crazy manipulator, he's crazy high strengths. Another aspect with him, what makes him so overpowered, is his existential thinking. His ability to impact you on an existential scale is a really dangerous strength to have and go up against. Someone like PJ would crumble against that. Honestly, like he crumbled against Red John because of the trauma. Like imagine someone doing what Red John does to you, but on an existential level, where every level and layer of your existence is now impacted. Maybe you think that's controversial. I don't think it is. High systemic foresight, knows what every part will lead to against multiple agents and systems. Yep, that's him incarnate. And very sophisticated planning and strategies. Yeah, he's tier 2.5. Judge Holden. We can talk about the judge. He's really dangerous. He's the same existential quality, but he's kind of perfect. Like, he never slips up, never makes it. He's Johan in a Wild Western setting, but with even higher existential intelligence and knowledge than Johan possesses, and he applies that perfectly to a situation. He's very creative too, with how he essentially baits in these. I'm not really gonna go into it. He baits in these Indians. They're red Indians, so they're not actually Indian, they're Native Americans. Slaughters them. He's part of a scalp hunting gang. He systematically breaks down and takes apart the Glanton gang in a novel until it's just the kid left, and obviously you know what happens to the kid at the end of the book. It's not really a good, it's not a feat, but it's just a show. Like, he is the Rock of the Wild West, and his potential will just keep rising. He can easily rise to a global scale. It's basically, we never see anything to contradict that, and that's why he deserves his tier. We never see anything to contradict him being able to just keep leveraging what he does to higher systems. When we see his extraordinary intellect and applies that to do so. Seong Moon, very dangerous manipulator, very dangerous. Like, I know that's technically like not as general outsmarting, but yeah, he breaks Dr. Frost, a guy on pure logic. He psychologically traumatizes him and has him confined to a mental facility for years by using this complex plan where he would make someone suicide, have someone related to that person also suicide, but only after Dr. Frost talks that person out of suicide. And then after he induces that, he would have Dr. Frost's mentor like die in a car crash, pretty much. Yeah, it was a very layered strategy which had the purpose of breaking down Frost, and that's exactly what he did. He was like institutionalized for years. So he basically, what Red John did to PJ, he did a much more complex version of that. And he's very dangerous. He has an ability, he's born with it. It's a character from DS Irae called Valeria Trifa. And what Trifa does, he has extrasensory perception, so he can pretty much mind read. And that's what Seong Moon has as well. He has higher empathy than someone like, he's higher superhuman empathy than someone like Will Graham. That's what Seong Moon has. But it's from the position of what if that person was in Hannibal Lecter's antagonistic position. So yeah, he has no moral restraints. Very dangerous character. He easily was going to destabilize Korea, and his plan was so potent that even when Dr. Frost countered it, it still continued twice. It happened twice. It happened when he was like, he had the layers of misdirection and other stuff. Not really going to get into it, but yeah, easily justified. This is Mikado Shinsen. He deceived Kyoko Kirigiri. He was literally on a case with Kirigiri. She had no idea who he is. That's his whole thing. He's a variationist, if I recall correctly. He just can completely become someone he isn't. He pretended to be Kyoko Kirigiri's grandfather on her mother's side, her maternal grandfather, completely undetected until like she eventually did figure it out, but he was already long gone. He created a Blake Association type of organization, but it's like even more impressive. It has even more complexity. We actually see how it operates. He's able to manipulate this mini change the world elk type of character called Geka Ryozuji, I believe that was his name. He's in a wheelchair and he can't move, and he basically just like has parallel investigation, visualizes the cases without being there. He should be in tier 2. I don't know where he is. He like disappeared as well. And And yeah, he anticipated a tragedy 10 years before it happened. I believe it might have even been longer than that. His anticipation, Kirigiri didn't end up doing. She ended up. So his plan succeeded, but failed because Junko countered it. So his anticipation was anticipation. He had high systemic foresight, but in the end it failed. He also killed himself for his plan, so he has high willingness to act, but like that's not one of the categories we're scaling here. Lickhorn, insane character, truly insane. He's like 9 or something. Insane feats. You can search up his feats. I'm not really going to talk about them that much, but he like outsmarts like multiple different global organizations, from Russia, who was trying to like create Russian super soldiers out of Lickhorn, because that's how impressive he is. Outsmarting like assassination organizations, like multiple at the same time, different ones. Basically every single level of organization he outsmarts consistently at the same time. And he also has that parallel investigation stuff as well. That's not too relevant. That kind of is relevant actually, because he can navigate multiple systems and agents at the same time. And that's why I think L is very dangerous, because of stuff like that. Like, who else has that parallel processing? Shinsen, Gekko Ryozuji, Hao, like, we'll get to L anyway. Kenjaku manipulates, like, and plans, like, across centuries. He easily qualifies for the systemic foresight aspect. The creativity aspect, literally created the main character. Yeah, based off of his prior experimentation where he raped this woman like 9 times to create the death paintings or something. He does crazy. He's the one who figured out how Sukuna can transfer himself into a cursed object. He's the one who cracked the code to immortality, or situational immortality, like Voldemort's Horcrux. He does affect global scales. He's able to manipulate the USA, China, I believe, like multiple countries, world superpowers. He's easily on this tier, either way. And I think the only ones we have left are like Blackbeard, and we'll talk about Blackbeard. You guys are like, what, Blackbeard? What? How could he be on this tier? How could he be above Patrick Jane? What's Blackbeard done? I'll tell you what he's done. Aside from that meme, Blackbeard. So his problem, he does have weaknesses, but his strengths overplay that. He seems to have multiple personalities. We don't know for sure. It's kind of been implied. He's been stated to have a strange body. That's not relevant to this. What's relevant is the fact that he had literal 0 bounty, and in just 2 years became an Emperor of the Sea, someone with global influence that he built up on his own. He's really hard for another Emperor of the Sea to track, because he's constantly teleporting. His motives are just that unpredictable. He can be at Winter's Island on one point and Amazon Lily at another point. So he literally like flip-flops between a New World, the Grand Line. Like, he's literally just everywhere. And eventually his plan is global domination. So yeah. But yeah, so think about the stuff I talked about with Crocodile and Doflamingo. Blackbeard's not as methodical as Crocodile, but he still has higher impact than Crocodile. And he has way more influence than Doflamingo. Like, he became an emperor. He's the first guy in history to eat 2 devil fruits, and that's because of his high creative innovation with the Yami no Mi, because he researched this for like, he's memorized the entire devil fruit encyclopedia. He's also a historian, that's his hobby. So he applies his knowledge of history with Roxy Zebek, who is wiped from history, funny enough, and Blackbeard's own investigation and skill as a historian is able to recover information about him to apply for himself. There's a theory that Blackbeard is Roxy's son. We don't know, that's not confirmed. But yeah, Blackbeard's probably going to solidify his position even more here. Yeah. Became a warlord easily in a few months. Became Emperor of the Sea in 2 years. I didn't think it was 2 years. I think it was in a year. He was Emperor of the Sea during the time skip because of his feats at Hachinosu Island, and he led his forces to defeat the Whitebeard forces, who had way more influence than he did, and they still won. But yeah, Blackbeard, that's Blackbeard for you. Marshall D. Teach. And yeah, him controlling Pirate Island's a really good strategic move, because Pirate Island it's literally known as the Pirate Beehive. So he literally gets passive fighters joining his forces without actually having to align himself or make them align himself with him. Eddie Mora. Yeah, not going to talk about Eddie Mora. I'm going to die. So yeah, I already spoke about a lot of these characters. L. We won't spoil L. L's here, he's for a justified reason, aside from the fact that he's the world's greatest mind, aside from the fact he does multiple global level investigations at the same time, aside from the fact he was fighting someone with supernatural influence on this scale, literally this scale, and was winning for most of the interaction. Yeah. But he has even more crazier stuff than that to justify his placement here. But I'll let Loyaro deal with that. Schneisel and Lelouch, I think these are the two I haven't talked about yet. So not many people realize that Schneisel with the whole, well, he used the weapons that essentially amounted to nuclear weapons, but he did cultivate global influence in the end for his own ability. I don't think there's much to say about. I can elaborate why Schneider's here after if you disagree with it. Same with Lelouch. The Zero Requiem was something. Yeah, it didn't have perfect success, but it was successful enough, to be honest here. Yeah, Lelouch has weaknesses, but you can't use those weaknesses to judge the end of series Lelouch, because the whole point is he grows from those emotional weaknesses. He navigates multiple identities at the same time. He's navigating with a supernatural power. Yeah, for the Euphemia, he literally balanced the Euphemia massacre into his favor when it was, so he has good adaptation velocity. His the wars and campaigns that he's involved in takes really high adaptation velocity anyway. His Chinese Federation feat, that's also another 2.5 feet. Yeah, Lelouch v Britannia. I do think he's qualified to be here. I think that's everyone there. Yeah. Oh, Mion Sonozaki as well. I think I skipped her. Basically, episode 8, she has 2.5 scale feats. She's not 2.5 until episode 8, but she's good. She also has insane emotional management. She's never gotten Hini Mizawa. Spoiler alert, there's something called Hini Mizawa syndrome in Higurashi. She's never gotten it apart from one occasion, and that was in a bigger cat box. I think it was 2. It was like, okay, so Go was a bigger cat box, and then this was an even bigger cat box than Go. And she's never gotten it. She only got in the very last cat box in a very unique situation against a character that was way above her in existence even. Engineering it specifically because they were interested. It was an insane feat, to be fair, for that character, but yeah. My voice is gonna die, so I'm just gonna not bother talking about the characters anymore. We're just gonna say that they're in the tier, and this is my tier list. Zarya Fawn. We should talk about tier 3 actually. I guess I'll just do that. I'll just name the character instead of like going systematically over them. Yeah. So tier 3, aka Galactic, outsmarting. So this is interstellar manipulation involving emergent phenomena, large-scale diplomacy, and long-term strategy across civilizations. Or equivalent, obviously. So the key metrics are systemic adaptability, or SA. That's a really dangerous acronym, but that's what it is. Ability to adjust to galactic scale systems with emergent properties. Emergent complexity, or EC, so complexity of large-scale interconnected systems. Strategic foresight, or SF, multi-generational long-term planning. This is Zaryafon. He obviously has that kingdom's cultivation, blah 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 blah. That his conflict is literally a space opera. Yang Wenli. This is Raffion from World of Warcraft. This is Grand Admiral Thrawn, literally in that conflict once again. Urihara, the smartest character in Bleach, comes up with infinite strategies and blah 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 blah. And actually, we don't actually need to do that because we have multiple realms. Huecamundo, they're universe scale realms basically, or they add up to universal in scale, each third. Huecamundo, Soul Society, etc. Human world. This is Mars Volkozagan. He's in a galactic scale of event as well. We're not going to get into it. Swarm Lord, once again. This is like, there's these creatures called the Tyranids in Warhammer. It's basically like the hive mind, you could say, like the main intelligence of them. Pretty good. Joker, very inconsistent character, but I think he overall can be balanced here. Same with Batman. He literally lost to Hush Riddler, but then at one point he will be able to like outsmart Darkseid. He's a stupid, most inconsistent character on the whole tier list. But I think on average he's here, and I think it's consistent because he's not like a 12th level intellect or 8th level intellect, so I think it makes sense for him to like reach these conflicts consistently, like consistently reach at least the galactic scale. He's actually 3.5. Tatsuya Shiba might be surprising. Tasha Grimm, think Senku Ishigami, but if they were built for outsmarting and operate up to a galactic scale. You probably thought I was going to downplay like the Detective Conan characters. This is Shuichi Akai. He's like, yeah, one of the smartest Detective Conan characters, or Detective Conan universe characters. I think that the complexity of his situation does reach here. This is Shockwave composited. Yeah, not much to say about him. This is Lucius Ograti. I do think the dynamics with the Demon World, the fact his manipulation of time, etc., etc., he is placed here. I can elaborate. It's easier for me to elaborate outside, but yeah. Robute Guilliman. He's once again, his main op is somewhere here. Here, Abaddon the Spoiler. Yeah, Galactic conflict. This guy's really impressive actually. But yeah, that's Reinhard von Lohengram. Wasn't his original name, but yeah, pretty much Lelouch on a galactic scale, or an interstellar scale rather. This is Rei Furia, probably the smartest Detective Conan character universe, also here. This is Fastos. He's from the Eternals Marvel comics. Ogai Mori. This is Orsted, trapped in a time loop. Really intelligent character regardless. The Dragon God. Yeah, he's trapped in a time loop against a guy who manipulates timelines and the world as a whole anyway. Maruam. He's here because he shows he's easily able to navigate lower scale complexities, and he beat all the world's strategists in the game, like all the best people in a game in localized scenarios. His learning ability is insane, so I think his learning ability and combined with his strategy that he showed, his potential upscales him here. We can actually measure that kind of. Makima, downplayed character for no reason. I think it's because she is simps or something, I don't really know. She blatantly like navigates the demon world. She has strong planning. Some of the demons she manipulates are primal fears on a universal scale, so you can't really downplay her to tier 2 or tier 2.5 if she navigates that level of supernatural characteristics and characters in general. She even has the Cosmos Devil, which is like which would give her the entire knowledge of the universe itself. It's really hard to downplay her, actually. and then she's literally the control devil on herself on the universal scale, like manipulation itself on a universal scale. It's a bit weird to downplay her, actually. Yeladan Stormlage, very impressive mage from World of Warcraft. Not much to say. Lex Luthor, I think he balances here. Sometimes he'll like upscale, obviously, like Batman. He's definitely higher than Batman though, I think. Well, they're comparable, it's debatable, him and Batman. Ender, so he's like the peak of Ender's game overall, navigating interstellar conflict again, once again. Albedo, he's like, well, Albedo rather. He's a Galvin who, due to the Omnitrix, is like trapped as looking like Ben. He's a consistent opponent anyway. Izuru Kamakura, basically the implications of his planning, everything, his talents, everything, basically everything about Izuru, the implications of him puts him at tier 3. Abaddon, already mentioned him. This is Kang Jinyuk. I didn't see anything in the tower that would like register. You can wank the Lovecraftian creatures all you want, it's just not going to justify a higher tier on its own. Maybe he's tier 4 though, I think that might be fine, but didn't really see anything to be higher than that. Yeah. Aizen, he's like a little bit, he's not as smart as Urihara, but he also has better things, like it's better matchup wise than Urihara. He has like, because he's really manipulative, etc. And when we say manipulative, we mean in a more ruthless way. Like Urihara, of course he's manipulative, but he's not Machiavellian. He's not manipulative in that sense. Aventurine from Honkai Star Rail, it's pretty obvious. Jor-El. Albedo from Overlord. This one might be surprising, but the conflicts that Nazarick engages in, she's top 3 in Nazarick. So Pandora's Act is like 3rd, but he's 2.5, and I think Demiurge and Albedo have these complex plans, especially in a novel, that scale them up to this tier. Alpha, pretty much the same thing, but in a different universe, Eminence and Shadow. Okay, Shadow Garden is a really, really complex, it's probably the most complex organization, potentially. Yeah, maybe not as complex as the Empire, but in this tier, maybe the most complex. The Poor Mafia, yeah, I think it is more complex than the Poor Mafia, but they engage with an equally complex organization, the Call of Diablos, and destroy, despite the Call of Diablos being around for centuries. Pretty impressive. She's basically the leader and the main brains. Jack Vesalius, he's from Pandora Hearts. Insane manipulator. He's like Otto Apocalypse, but more nuanced, but he's not as smart as Otto. At the same time, yeah, he manipulates like, he's an insane manipulator, centuries spanning manipulations like beyond his death. So he died, and 100 years he's still manipulating things. So how's he doing that if he's not alive? Think about that for a second. Insane foresight. Grazkul Fraka, Warhammer. This is Deathwing from Warcraft. Bayaz, first floor, impressive guy. Captain Harlock, space pirate. This is Vrildox. He's a Kalunian, as you can see. He's the least impressive one out of the 3 that I have on this list. Junko, I already made a doc on Junko, and I can talk about her further, why she's justified for this tier. Climb bowls, but like that's not like the justification. Paul Atreides, it's pretty obvious. Superman, he's actually more consistent and fights people on this level and above than Batman does in intelligence, but his intelligence is undermined by his brute strength and his hacks, and it's basically the physical battle aspect undermines his intelligence and outsmarting capabilities. Change the World L, he's basically prevented a global extinction. He defeated the supernatural aspects of the Death Note, so that definitely upscales him from there, since he actually did plan for that and planned for his death. So yeah, in only 22 days he stopped global extinction. Really impressive feat, because he shares the aspects of canon now, but like he's obviously an elevated version. He has 4D chess, which I heard Dax PMFT wanted to debate me on that, and I'll accept that debate easily. We can debate on it. And it's not just 4D chess, like the analogy for like complex systems in politics, like the actual fourth dimensional relativity awareness. But yeah, due to how abstract his mind is. Rampo, yeah, he's on this tier. All I have to say is 55 minutes. You can honestly go further than that with the current feats, with Fukuchi. I think it's justified. Anyway. This is Wang Lin. Cultivation novel. Not as good as the other Ergen-verse protagonist, but he's decent. Valeria Von Doom, this is Doom's daughter. I should talk about tier 4s. Yeah, so tier 4, universal outsmarting, manipulating universal systems, so time, causality, and space across vast systems and scales. The metrics would be CI, so able to influence or manipulate abstract systems like time, space, or causality. Foresight, depth, long-term planning across universal scales and timelines. Systemic scope, impact across entire galaxies, universes, or cosmic systems. So yeah. So the formula for that would be outsmarting is equal to CI plus FD times by SS. Pretty simple. So yeah, this is Caesar Cray. Yeah, Caesar Cray from Warhammer. The Silent King. I think that's his name, or his title rather. This is Supreme Intelligence, the leader of the Kree. Pretty good. That's Star Constellation, Immortal Venerable. That's Spectral Soul, Demon Venerable. You can read Reverend Insanity if you want to learn about that feats. You know, the Reverend Insanity tier should focus on the Venerables. They're honestly underappreciated. This is Quick Ben. He's from Malazan as well. Like, I know we had lower tier Malazan characters. His is a higher tier one. Quick Ben. He interacts with conflicts and higher entities as well, like Shadow Throne, who we'll get to, kinda, since I've given up doing that. Fyodor Dostoevsky. Yeah, Fyodor's, I think, and Dazai, they do qualify for tier 4, but I had them in tier 4.5 at one point, but I don't think they are actually 4.5. I don't think they're on that tier. They don't qualify for 4.5, but they do yet, I should say yet. Yeah. This is Mr. Marvelous. I believe that was what his name is. Or Mr. Marvelous, something like that. Yeah, he's on that tier. This is Melkeve, something like that. Melkev from World of Warcraft. That is Limitless, Demon Venerable. He's the closest to being 4.5, by the way, but he fumbled. That is Leto Atreides. Lady Bone Demon. You might be surprised to see her if you know of her feats. She's justified being here. Emperor Palpatine. Composite though, specifically. Disney Emperor Palpatine's probably tier 3, but composite is tier 4. Advanced Ultron, he could be higher. This is meant to be Brainiac 5, so the future version of Brainiac. Yeah, he's here. Izuku Gaien. So she should be here actually. Yeah, she should be here. Brainiac 5 should be here. My bad. This is Algeron. Wow. This is Giant Sun. Immortal Venerable. Algalon from World of Warcraft. This is Hitogami, manipulates things, cross timelines, etc. Well, if they're here, they probably do that. So, Ben 10, saved the universe multiple times. He has aliens that upscale him. Alien X could be here. Some would argue even here. I don't think so, but here, yeah. And Brainstorm as well. A great amount of those type of aliens come up with stuff on this level. Gu Shangyi. I have no clue what people were seeing, but I didn't see anything that could put him here or even above tier 5. Maybe he does have that, maybe he does. I simply don't know, but he seems fine here. Blue Marvel, he's here. This is Onvar, leader of the Tau Empire in Warhammer. This is Eldorado Uthron. I think they control the Eldari, something like that. Yeah, I think that's accurate. Eldorado Uthron. This is Dalian from the Mystical Archives of Dantalion. Yeah, she easily operates on universal scale systems with the magical complexity elevating it to that degree. This is Composite Subaru. So I think, okay, so the thing about Subaru is, you can argue him to be here, tier 3 or even tier 2.5. It's Echidna. She's the reason he's here. He has her passively when he's Greed Subaru. She's actually on this level. Yeah. You can argue the way he deals with authorities. Authorities kind of are a tier 4, if not higher. Even you can argue authorities are a tier 5 level threat even. And he deals with those as Pride Brew. But yeah. And then his mastery of his own mastery of his power Return by Death is like the apex of Return by Death is at least here, if not higher, but he's at least here. For what he demonstrated, he's here though. Feng Yuan. Feng Yuan is the most wanked character in all of SCD, even more than PJ, even more than Baku. Baku's not even that wanked. He was it's mainly Hao's more wanked than Baku actually. He's even more wanked than Hao, even more wanked than PJ. Even more wank than some other characters that we still haven't got to yet. Yeah, Feng Yuan. He doesn't deal with anything. The simple answer is he just doesn't deal with aspects that are above, that are qualified for these tiers. If you can wank him using the River of Time at best to this tier, but he doesn't actually deal with the River of Time to a point where it would be this tier. And tier 9, like, being a more venerable is only this tier, plainly. Even the representation, even the Dao marks, or the Dao worlds rather, those are represented as space-times. Like, it's pretty localized to space-time. Alright, tier 4.5. So, the scope is operating across multiple universes and branching timelines, leveraging multiversal frameworks. And the key metrics is multiversal navigation efficiency, so success in traversing and influencing multiversal structures. So, M&E. Probability optimization, so exploiting probabilities to ensure desired outcomes across timelines, PO. Systemic influence, manipulating systems across universes and timelines. so that's like 0.5. But the multiversal, it would obviously upscale the multiversal aspects when they're like more complex multiversal. Like let's say it's a Hilbert space, let's say the multiverse has spiritual aspects, etc, etc, or the equivalent. So Ogi and Gaian are here because they operate on a conceptual level, and that conceptual level, you could even argue they should be here if you want. Like Ogi outsmarted the darkness for a considerable amount of time. Gaian like predicted Ogi's existence. She has insane feats like that. Yeah, and their system is probably conceptually profound enough to get them at least here, and it could be there, depending on how you argue it. And yeah, the formula is MNE times PO add SI. But anyway, that's Yulang / Waver. Fate's version, I guess you could say, or Fate, yeah. Nasty verse. He's here. This is Yuki Kagazaka from Slime. Basically becomes a godlike human through his manipulations of systems on this level. This is Brainiac Classic. Well, not Classic, this is just Brainiac, like the normal version. He should be like the baseline of this level at least. Especially with things like the God Machine, like that arc. And like, that's why I was talking about Lex Luthor's high impact, but we won't get into that. Theodore Miller from Bookie and Magician, Sinbad from Magi, Simon the Digger from Gurren Lagann, Tengen Toppa, Gurren Lagann. Sherlock Holmes, you might expect him in this tier. I don't think he consistently is at that level. He does have feats to be at that level though. Fate Grand Order, Sherlock Holmes. The best Sherlock as well. Shadow Throne from Malazan, he's the entity I mentioned. Sauron. Rick Prime. C-137 Rick. Otto. I'll talk about Otto eventually, like maybe in a debate or whatever. I do think he's at least here. I do know about Otto. Professor Paradox, you can argue he's here. I think here is comfortable. Novel Cars, his existence alone guarantees him this tier, like the state of being he has. Kang the Conqueror, pretty intuitive. Monica Sayu, so she's connected to the root, but she's not like Void Shiki, who is the root. But Void Shiki's not good in outsmarting, and she is. That's like another difference. She does like scheme and stuff, especially across timelines. This is, yeah, the Navigation of the Lost Belt definitely qualifies them for this. This is Moriarty from Fate Grand Order. That's Kelis, not even gonna Amacrimbor Kelis, but I tried. Yeah, he's from the second Apocalypse series. Devious manipulator, like he's like Paul Atreides on crack. Nice. Azimuth the First Thinker, even what's his name? Evil Maltruant believes that Azimuth is like the smartest across all of time. The entire time stream is Azimuth's like #1. Easily qualifies for this. He understands things like the maps of infinity, but that's not literally the outsmarting he's engaging in. He has outsmarted entities who would qualify for this level, pretty much, in all systems. He's not an intellect one trick. Like someone like Bulmer's or intellect one trick I wouldn't put here. Accelerator. He has stuff with the Quippaloff and Kabbalism. Stuff like that puts him on this tier rather than his standard vector manipulations, which doesn't actually have to do with outsmarting, but he is on this tier of outsmarting regardless. Amasuka Shiro. Yeah, Amasuka Shiro. Fate Grand Order version though, he's on this level. Bill Cipher, he is a tier 5 entity technically, but he has errors that are pull him down to this. Like he loses to people who are only this tier. at best, which would be Ford. And Stanley's like tier 1 at best. So it's Stan third who's on this tier, who he was steps ahead of, to be fair, for the most part. And he did win in every single world apart from one. So you can make an argument, because he won in every other world apart from one, across infinity, he should be here. And because of his state of being, that's why losing in one made him lose in all. But his ego is literally what caused that, and if his ego can cause that on that level, then yeah, I don't think he deserves this tier, even if he has the nature of that being to be this tier. For the record, he was this tier of being, like tier 4.5 or 4.75 if you extend it further, but he's not. But Book of Bill amped him to that tier. But the problem is yeah, he has inconsistencies on this level. But he also has exploits above this level. Eon, pretty self-evident. Fu, smartest Dragon Ball character, I guess. He's from Super Dragon Ball Heroes. The only Dragon Ball character I can really have on this tier list. Now I can have a few more probably, but he's like the apex. Evil Morty, pretty obvious. Claire Stanfield, not so obvious. He's the smartest Naruto-verse character, and that's the same verse Izai is from. Also, where the fuck is Izai? Izai is this tier, by the way. Izai is supposed to be tier 3. I have no idea what happened to him. He like disappeared off the tier list. But Izai is tier 3. But yeah, back down. Claire, he's basically interacting with cosmic level systems, to the point he's a comparable threat to some omniscient devil called Ronnie. But yeah, and that's just through his ability as an agent and outsmarting. He's so smart that he can come up with any plan, literally anything, on the spot, and it will succeed. He can execute it. That's how competent he is. Diablo from Slime, Mr. Fantastic, Doctor Doom. Bowser is interesting. Bowser, he has lows in like tier 2 lows, but his highs are tier 5 potentially, but he's easily tier 4.5. Every single Bowser is the same Bowser, by the way. They're just playing different roles. The Mario cast. Anyway, yeah, Bowser's here, at least. I think him and Doctor Doom, I've seen a debate between them. It wasn't an outsmarting debate, it was an intelligence debate, but it was pretty interesting. But yeah, for Nairobi, you can be here, Bowser. Nicol Bolas, really impressive, manipulating against planes, civilization across planes. Delves with tier 5 structures occasionally, but not consistently. So he's here. Rimuru Tempest, pretty obvious. Maybe some people will think he's tier 5. I don't, and I've professionally scaled Rimuru. But yeah, tier 5 outsmarting was different to tier, the equivalent in power scaling. Now we're on tier 5. So this is metaphysical outsmarting. So manipulating ontological structures and the foundational rules of reality itself. So ontological manipulation, OM, altering the fundamental rules of existence, or the fundamental nature of existence. So that's the type of outsmarting you're engaging in. PER, so that would be paradox exploitation rate, leveraging paradox to create outcomes that defy conventional logic. But this is logic where it's like a actual fundamental force, and not logic as a language, for example. Metasystem complexity. So this is the complexity of the metaphysical systems being manipulated. So OI is equal to OM plus PER times by MSC. And there's an interesting... So it's not just that. The scope isn't just that. It's also a meta-reality. And so if you've noticed, B Star's eyes here, and it's like, wait, how is this guy here? Well, it's because I think the book qualifies for that meta-reality aspect, because it's not an analogy for a difference between reality and fiction. I think that difference is like a dimensional representation. And I think SCP has that as well. SCP has that with 3812, but then it also has pataphysical aspects, which is arguably 5.5 in SCP specifically, not in Beastar's Eye's case, because that's like extended metaphysics. It's like the science of imaginary solutions. That's specifically what pataphysics are, but SCP has their own definition, I believe. And yeah, nobody's here. He's not higher, I'm sorry. Neither is Doctor Who. I'll debate all the nobody guys, all the Doctor Who guys. That's the Master. This is the Master, that's the Doctor, or all iterations of the character. And same with the Master. River Song should be here too, but you know, she isn't. A lot of characters that should be here aren't here. This is Meng Hao from I Shall See the Heavens. This is Nizoth from World of Warcraft. Smartest World of Warcraft character, I think. Yeah, this is Oryx. Very smart character, actually. But he's not as smart as his sister, the Witch Queen Savathun. Here's Thanos, the Darkest Knight. This is Fink Nilvalan. Obviously, I'll easily debate on the No Game No Life characters. This is... he's from the Akashic, a novel called The Bastard Magic Instructor of the Akashic Records, something like that. But he's from the novelization. His name's Titus Crow, so I used the Lovecraft Titus Crow because he doesn't have an official image. So yeah, that's him. He's a Demon King. He's a very smart character, probably smarter than the protagonist up here, Glenn Radars. This is Fate Grand Order Qin Xia Huang. That's Saulot, I believe. An Antediluvian. From World of Darkness. This is Plum. That's Baba Yaga. World of Darkness version. It's Battler. Battler can't solve logic errors, so he's not this tier. Beerich had to carry him. Erica's relative to Battler, below actually. Willard. Not versatile enough, not Kingdom of the Gods level, so he's not this tier. Klein, very impressive character. Smart. Amon. Amon's also this tier. I have no idea why he's not on this tier list. Evernight. People call it Evernight Marmy. I'm not that guy, so you know. Evernight Goddess. She's on this tier. She's a transmigrator as well. Spoiler alert. Korvac. I think he's on this tier. He's from Marvel. Dr. Bright. Yeah, pataphysical swan machine stuff. Maybe that form of Dr. Bright, yeah, he's on this tier. Erica, I already talked about Erica. Darkseid, yeah, he's a new god. Navigates a platonic archetypal realm. Actually punches above his weight to source level outsmarting, which is still this tier, so it doesn't matter. John Taylor. The Night Side is really impressive. Ontological nature with creatures in there. Alistair Crowley. John Constantine. This is Gu Chensha. Kine from World of Darkness, or Kane in this case. This is Gu Taxion. This is Gu Chensha's dad. Manipulated him when he had nigh omniscience. Very impressive character. There's aspects, obviously, why if they're here, they qualify for this tier. Segarak outsmarted, what's her name? Not Tenzi, Slanesh. Outsmarted Slanesh using like broken absurdities. He's actually 5.5. Steps into that true pataphysical realm. Yeah, Beastars, I already spoke about him. Kinda. This is Lonnie Drovnir, like relative to Fink. The Emperor of Mankind, he like has to navigate a conflict with 4 Chaos Gods at the same time, like the Force, the big 4 basically at the same time. One of which being Tenzic, who's here, really impressive character. That's Vecna as well from Dungeons and Dragons. Dr. Manhattan, Reinhard Heydrich. He doesn't have the levels that Mercurius has to qualify Mercurius for here. Maybe you can argue it, but I don't think so. Izayoi Sakimaki from Mondaji Tachi. That's Glenn, I already talked about him. Emmett Ines, Jabril. Oh yeah, this is David Semvoid, or David Femboy. That's Lucifer Morningstar. It's another World of Darkness character. Antediluvian. Her name's Malkov, I believe, or something like that. Yeah. This is the Vordamus, like one of the top tier mage archangel from World of Darkness. Wait, let me talk about the tier. So this is the final tier, Cataphysical, outsmarting I called it. It's mastery over ultimate principles in any form. It's systems beyond metaphysical frameworks, and that includes pataphysical extensions, etc, etc. So anything that could be a metaphysical framework or even a pataphysical one. The metrics of it are ultimate principle manipulation, so it's the ability to manipulate absolute constants or frameworks. Metaconceptual dynamics, creating and controlling systems beyond abstraction or causality, but you're way beyond causality. It's more so the meta causality and the meta abstraction, like meta concepts. Recursive multiversal complexity, so RMC, thriving in resolving infinite recursion loops. It's easily absolute metalogical mastery, so operating paradoxal, metalogical or incomprehensible frameworks, so ineffable frameworks, pretty much. Like that's one way to get there. And the formula would be outsmarting is equal to UPM times MCD plus RMC plus ANLM. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I talked about Vormus, kind of. He's from World of Darkness. This is not meant to be those who dwell behind the stars. It's meant to be the adversary. The adversary is specifically the one that I think is at that level. That's Nurgle, but it's meant to be the Shaitan, which is, yeah, that's Lilith. Lilith could honestly be 5.5. Any of these guys could be tier 5. You could lower them if you want. Lambda, so people are like, well, Lambda doesn't really do much in Umineko. Well, yeah, because I'm not scaling Lambda based off Umineko. Spoiler alert, she's in Higurashi. She has 2 characters, Takano, and I think Takano is this tier, but Satoko is this tier easily. Specifically Sotsu. Sotsu is where Satoko's feats come into play, and she is able to compete on the same level as Rika or Burn Castell, which is also where I think Burn's main feats come from. But Umineko does give aspects unlike Lambda. It gives Lambda some stuff, but it balances Burn pretty much. It shows how far she's come, because she was a 100-year-old witch in Higurashi, and then she becomes a 1,000-year-old witch in Umineko. And these aren't literal 1,000 years, it's just a metaphor for being beyond the concept of time in the meta world. But yeah, she solved a logic error, so, you know, she's clearly not restricted to things the Endless Sorcerer is restricted to, Battler. She's a true Voyager witch. Battler's not at that level. So is Lambda. Or specifically with Satoko and Rika. She did eventually outsmart Lambda in one of her best categories, which is setting traps in Higurashi. Yeah, they're just both Voyager witches who are OP as fuck. Beatrice solved Battler's logic error. Like, Battler was completely cooked. She solved that. The Golden Land is like the most it's a Featherine level feat, which not many people know about. It's stated in side stories that it's essentially the formula for it would result in something that would surpass Featherine. She created the Golden Land, so she did do it in Umineko. She is technically Featherine level, but Featherine level isn't Featherine level, if that makes sense. Also, this is not meant to be Featherine, because Featherine is technically not doesn't do much outsmarting. It's mainly Ua and, spoiler alert, Hanyu that make up Featherine, and I'm just using Featherine as a stand-in because she's like the ultimate version of them. Featherine, Augustus, Aurora. Yeah, Biricha, OP character. Her cat box more impressive than, to the point where King of the God characters are interested in it. Surpassed everything from Burn Castell, like the feat, creating the 2-day cat box, infinite different possibilities and fragments, and the complexity of the tale required Burn Castell to create a larger cat box, which Willard did solve. That's an impressive feat from, that's a tier 6 feat from Willard, to be honest. But yeah, you could argue Willard could be here, but I don't think he has the versatility for it. Lucifer from World of Darkness. Yeah. Mitra from Shinza Bansho. She's specifically the first throne. She's been planning from the first throne, which is it's an insane feat. Where is he? Yeah, he's there. Until like Pantheon, Dies Irae Pantheon, to fight Naraka, who's like this ineffable force. But anyway, yeah. This is the top 1 Chinese character, I guess you could say. Yeah. From Eternal Heaven Suppression or something like Suppression, Heavenly Abyss, Eternal Suppression of the Heavenly Abyss. He's from that. Yeah, he's around here. This is Auriel or Artosh. Basically, Artosh is a tautology that the Ex Machina who can solve an infinite recursion of illogical and abstract frameworks. They can keep adapting. They can adapt to the level of a god. They still can't adapt to Artosh's tautology. It's still an absolute tautology. So he literally qualifies more than most characters. Like I wouldn't say more than most characters here, but he easily qualifies for this tier, Artosh. And Auriel is just a representation of he's a re-emanation of Artosh's ether. And yeah, outsmarted blank multiple times. He lost to Vig Drovnir twice, that's why Vig's here. But Vig, in the one time Auriel beat him, that was on a... So when he lost to Vig, they were in Vig's specialty in a localized scenario, but Auriel beat him once in that specialized scenario. And Vig's like pressed about Auriel, so clearly he's beating him in other ways too. He's also beating him on a political level, no game, no life's politics. Nyarlathotep, the only one I think is good enough. Like he qualifies for this tier. Like the others are just too abstract or won't engage in any meaningful outsmarting context. Yeah, Nyarlathotep. Rufus, yep. Even when she was immortal, she outsmarted Alavinus, who is like a god beyond the original god, and then she has her own mechanics to her, which I can get into. My voice is dying though, unfortunately. Sheogorath, I wanted to create an Elder Scrolls character for each tier, so yeah. Sheogorath's here. He outsmarted all the other Daedric princes, so he's here. His plans are so complex that he himself doesn't even know them. Like his own goals are unknowable to himself, which is crazy, but that's the level of absurdity we're dealing with. This is Master Terion from Demon Bane Mythos. I think he's a usable character. Nyarlathotep from Demon Bane can probably be here too. But yeah. Leader of the Black Lodge. He does really impressive shit, basically, that qualifies. What's his name? Talos Stormcrown, but he also has 2 other identities like Zuring Arctus and Isgramor. Like he's basically a fusion of a lot of characters, and the most impressive one is the one he mantled, which is Lorcan. That's how he became one of the 9 divines. So we're using Lorcan's feats, and Lorcan's feats are more than enough to be here. The Man in Black from the Dark Tower, aka Walter O'Dim, aka Randall Flagg. He has more names than that as well. Yeah, he's definitely here. Already talked about Hanyu and Ua, kinda. This is Garn from the Dark Tower, but not Garn. That would be too unfair if I put actual Garn. I don't think actual Garn can be used. This is specifically avatars because they do engage in outsmarting. So it's not like they're pointlessly here. Just well, I don't think there's any point of putting omniscience, etc. But yeah, he engages in outsmarting with his partner in crime, the Crimson King, right here. Specifically this in novels like The Green Mile, in novels like If It Bleeds, in novels like Insomnia. Yeah. They're playing tier 6 chess pretty much. Riku, he did actually somehow exploit Artosh. His plan was so invincible that Artosh's omniscient couldn't see a way to get out of it, and overcame Artosh's. By the way, Artosh's tautology is so absolute that even if you have a paradoxical another concept of strongest, his one will always win out. That's how absolute it is, and Riku still overcame that by becoming the concept of the weakness. Found a way to get the Sunyasta in a much more efficient way than any of the gods. But to be fair with the gods, they just can be less efficient because they have the resources, obviously. Mercurius, the goat, Karl Ernst Croft, Alessandro Di Cagliostro. He is specifically here because his throne can create paradoxes and he can still like navigate that shit. And his is a self-sufficient throne as well, so it's an ultimate throne with an absolute law. And the only way it got dismantled was because Mercurius himself had his philosophical paradox and his dilemma. That's the only reason it got dismantled. Otherwise it would have continued forever. Yeah, he can create emanations within emanations, even though they're above the singularities. So you can create emanations within emanations that are already above 2 loops or 2 foreknowledge loops of singularities. These are metaphysics, or in this case cataphysics. Vivek, I'm not going to really talk about him here. I regret introducing him into the community, but I did before I left completely. So yeah, but he's here. We can talk about Vivek. There's like infinite and counter-infinite chances to obtain Amaranth, so every single time you can obtain Amaranth, you also don't obtain Amaranth. He resolved that with a complex plan in Coda that involved Jubal, who's a prisoner, and an imposter point outside of that. He also anticipated that same imposter point 1,000 years before it happened, when he was in a lower state of existence. But yeah, he achieved the Godhead. Very impressive feat. And then lastly, Blank, which I think is a poetic way to end this tier list. They're here. Specifically Blank, I think Saw on his own isn't consistent enough to be tier 6, but Blank together is easily consistent enough to be tier 6. They overcame a checkmate against Auriel. They outsmarted. They performed a feat that was like surpassed Artosh's level against the Ex Machina. They outsmarted Vig, who's relative to Auriel on a localized scale. Yeah, they're easily here. Those are things we can get into. But yeah. So that's the complete tier list and the system behind it, which is more important to convey than the tier list. So I hope it was enjoyable and informative together. Now, this is a glorious start for the new SCD revolution, a tale where the new overturns the ancient tradition. It may be microcosmic right now, but it will be monumental regardless. I recommend learning the information here and connecting with our friends around the community, because we should unite and we will conquer this passion. And I think the next steps are either my breakdowns or matchups or the omniscience video. It's your choice. I'll make a community post. But I also think I'll codify this into a coherent system on a website, because that's how power scalers or not power scalers, but power scaling had so much influence, because they have an actual website randoms and just people who want to get into it can go to. I was once a power scaler, so I know this. I've been many things there. They had their humble beginnings, and we shall follow suit. As for the challengers to my mountain, come, Your crown is here in your dreams, but in reality your king is waiting to meet your pitiful uprising in a debate. So come one and come all. Those that believe themselves worthy, there are many opponents to test that against, and those that I personally will defeat as examples. I am ready for anything. The question is, are you?